It has been half an hour since the onboard battle broke out. As the confrontation between the two sides became more and more intense, the combat forces of the various ministries were able to fight in an orderly manner under the organization of the cadres at the beginning, but in the end they inevitably entered a state of complete melee. From the deck to the room, from the sponge to the sky, the fierce sparks caused by the confrontation between the two forces can be seen everywhere. The main combat forces of the Charlotte family are all surrounded by elite warriors, reaching an evenly matched situation, and even unable to make breakthroughs. They can only see the stronger ones under limited circumstances. The royal court fan and his alternate combat power have killed the quartet among the armies of all nations. On Wangguo's side, the outstanding oven has already fallen. Using a gigantic smoothie, he was suppressed by Maria in the corner of the battle. Daifuku, who was parried by the smoke demon summoned by the transpiration fruit, was also retreating steadily under the combined attack of Sandersonia and Marigold. The rest are also Cracker, Compote and others are also restricted by one. Even Perispero, who was acting as the commander, was approached by Lafitte at this moment. Even if it is not on the battlefield, the people of Sabodi Archipelago who watched the whole battle can feel that the huge army of Wanuo was directly suppressed by Sean after colliding with Wano-kuni. Not to mention the family's combat power linked by Charlotte's bloodline, and no one has brought victory to this war. Sure enough, the air generals would win this war, but they didn't expect it to be in such a crushing way. Thinking like this, boom, in the picture, the scorching breath descended from the sky, coming from the direction of the sea. Although the attack was immediately blocked by the rest of the team, it was obviously enough for people on and off the court to notice the outsider's intervention. Immediately, under the unbelievable gaze of everyone, a green soaring dragon stepped on the flame cloud from the direction of the sea, and under it, there were more than a dozen evil pirates holding their weapons high and shouting ferociously. It's Kaido of the Beasts. The Sabodi Archipelago suddenly burst into alarm. Seeing this, Perispero also blocked Lafitte's strange attack with a ray of syrup, and shouted loudly, "Kaido's army is here to support Mother." Hearing this, the armies of all nations, who had already been suppressed and lost their fighting spirit, looked at the reinforcements coming from the sea in surprise. That stinky old man. When the thunder exploded all over his body and the electromagnetic guns were fired, countless soldiers who regained their courage and rushed forward were wiped out. Yamato ignored it and looked at the flying dragon in the air. The breath just now was directly rushing towards him. Air. Also at this moment, clusters of black clouds suddenly gathered behind Kaido, who was suspended in the air. Kaido's cold eyes swept towards the ground, as if he was contemptuous of the insignificant ants on the ground. At the same time, he looked at the two powerful auras fighting not far away, and once again locked his eyes on the extremely dazzling lightning battlefield below. The situation changes color. Under the black clouds and violent wind, Thunderbolt sprinted along the huge dragon's body, continuously bursting out with dazzling light. Boom. Without warning, Kaido changed from a dragon to a human, and suddenly fell from a high altitude, holding a mace in his hand at an unknown time. The wind howled, and the thunder and lightning trembled. Yisheng Sansei Yin Naraku, Thunder 8 trigrams. Not afraid of the horrifying attack just by seeing it, Yamato gathers the powerful Haki once again, and shakes it away with the thunder under ultimate compression. Boom. A more powerful impact than the previous conquerors broke out under this offensive. The surroundings were directly plunged into the gust of surging and rolling wind. Countless charred corpses and soldiers were drawn into it without any resistance. As expected of Laozi's son, he has inherited Laozi's talent. Feeling the tyranny of his opponents, especially Yamato's current age, Kaido showed a very satisfied expression. It's just that changing faces is also what Kaido is good at. Satisfaction immediately turned into dissatisfaction and anger. It's a pity that I inherited Laozi's blood, but actually follow Moda. I'm against you? It seems that letting you stay at Wano-kuni was a typo. Kaido regrets it very much now. Mastering the tyrant, coupled with the terrifying thunder fruit, Yamato is definitely beyond Jin's strength now. And the more he regretted, the angrier he became. The stronger conquerors from Kaido lashed out and began to slowly pin Yamato down. Even if the level of strength is not weaker than the original work or even surpassed, there is still a big gap between the 20-year-old Yamato and Kaido, who has been in the sea for several years. Smelly daddy. Moda is the one I want to follow in my life. That's right. I won't allow you, a reckless monkey, to say that. After Yamato bit down and slowly retreated, a beautiful figure broke into the collision between the overlords, and the red high-heeled shoes slammed into Kaido's hammered mace. Immediately afterwards, a shocking momentum exploded at this moment. All three are under the conquerors, and a more terrifying phenomenon than before erupts. The whole world seems to be trembling at this moment. Not only was the awe-inspiring majesty, but all the clouds were scattered by the aura, and the sea began to tremble violently. The waves piled up one after another, driving the momentum, causing the battlefield behind the ship to shake violently. All the people watching from a distance fainted under the aftermath of this force. 89 out of 10 of them, they're all Fang country soldiers who can't resist. With the joint efforts of the two, they insisted on offsetting the powerful attack of Kaido with the tyrant wrapped around him. Zila. There was a sonic boom of rapid electric currents in the air, and in the next moment, Yamato's figure appeared behind Kaido, and a mace full of high-voltage currents suddenly slashed at his neck. Clang. Kaido didn't dodge, letting the attack land on the neck impartially. The burst of attacks made Kaido bend forward involuntarily. Boom. Immediately after Hancock, who was also approaching quickly, a powerful kick hit Kaido's abdomen, and there was a muffled sound like a metal impact. This is given by Haki, which is as hard as a diamond, but it does not mean that defense is still useful in the face of tyrant and emission. Under the impact of huge force, Kaido's body was directly damaged by the attack, and he flew upside down. But soon he stabilized his figure in the air, and seemed to fall back to the deck not far away without damage. The powerful awakening and recovery power was speeding up to make up for the previous attack in the body. Kaido looked at Yamato and Hancock, who were standing side by side, but his eyes stayed on the latter for a while, and he couldn't help saying, "That guy Moda is really lucky." On the marching fleet, Quinn was somewhat stunned. These two guys actually knocked the boss into the air, is it true or not? Not to mention Yamato, who inherited the blood of the boss, is this beauty actually so powerful? Jack, who was standing beside him, also clenched his fists. He used to compete with each other when he was a child. Now that a few years have passed, there is such a big gap. That's the Emperor of the Amazon Lily, and one of the royal court band's trump cards, Boa Hancock. Jhin looked at the two of them with a twinkle in his eyes. Judging from the tyranny he has mastered, it is more difficult than the information. Immediately after an order was issued, the beast fleet behind him, with a combat strength of tens of thousands, slowly approached. Jhin stared rigorously at the surroundings of the battlefield. Although I had expected it after listening to the broadcast, I didn't expect the result to be a more exaggerated one-sided ending. Under such circumstances, even if their elite beasts join the battle, it feels that it will be difficult to completely reverse the disadvantaged situation. And the artificial fruit chain with the air general was also broken for this reason. But this is the idea of Kaido, who is the core will of all beasts, and it is a move that Zane thinks is irrational. As a general, he can only listen to the king's actions. Stinky old man. This battlefield is not for you beasts to participate in. Yamato fell back on the deck, looking at Kaido, whom he hadn't seen for nearly 9 years, with strong anger in his words. But there's nothing that should or shouldn't be. Kaido snorted coldly. Do you still have to use your mouth to teach lousy on the battlefield, Yamato? Kaido raised the mace high and slammed it at the two women in front of him, whistling and blowing wind along the way, and the mace was suddenly filled with crackling thunder. Boom. Amid the deafening explosions, 3 figures of disproportionate size collided again, centering on the place where the weapons collided, spreading a huge ripple visible to the naked eye in all directions. The sea trembled suddenly, setting off turbulent waves, and even the surrounding void, even at this moment, faintly distorted and deformed. Not far from the side, the officials of 100 Beasts who had been watching on the sidelines finally moved. It's time, little ones. Plague Quinn stood on the high platform of the bow behind the port, grinning and shouting. Ooh. Behind them, several ferocious pirates raised their weapons and shouted again, and countless zone ability users who turned into beasts looked ferociously and fierily at the battlefield. Yan Calamity Jin's eyes flashed slightly, and behind the black steel mask came a cold and indifferent voice. This war is not easy to fight, you should pay more attention. To win this battle, in addition to liberating the constrained main force of the nations, the old Yamato Big Mom must also deal with the flying generals. As long as the latter is suppressed or even defeated, the situation may reverse. After thinking this through, he turned into a black afterimage, surrounded by scorching flames, leapt high, and plundered towards the two who were fighting Kaido on the sea like walking on flat ground. A turquoise-wave passed directly in front of Jin's only path. The surrounding decks tens of meters away were cut in half by a blow, and even the seawater avoided the wave. The pteranodon was forced to stop its flight, and couldn't help but look in the direction of the attack. The eyes are as sharp as the eyes of an eagle. One of the 12 craftsmen with a sharp knife in his hand, Joriko Mihawk. It is not counted as the trump card of Utenban, but its strength is sufficient, and it is one of the 3 top swordsmen under the command of the most famous general in the country of warriors today. A bounty of 900 million, 70 million berry, the first of the 3 major disasters of the 100 Beasts. Mihawk stared at Jhin, and his eyes were mainly on a long knife hanging on his waist. A powerful swordsman who has never fought in New World, since the beginning of the war. I have been waiting for this for a long time. Jhin, however, stopped his support. The guy in front of him was also not to be underestimated. He suddenly received some information and Shen Guang said in awe-inspiring way, "What do you mean by waiting for a long time?" Under these words, he noticed the small details that he had ignored before. With the support of the 100 Beasts, although it may not be possible to completely turn the tide of the battle, it can be regarded as the addition of another huge force, not to mention that they are also the army of the 4 emperors. But on Wanakuna's side, they didn't fall into shock, or even their morale was impacted. Who knows? Mihawk didn't answer the reason for the opponent's question. His fighting spirit soared, and he rushed towards Zhigung with an unrivaled sword power. When the beasts began to battle, the dramatic changes in the scene quickly attracted the attention of many people. During the battle, "Where are you looking?" Just as Maria turned her head back for a short while, there was a sudden shout of anger from beside her, and immediately the long sword slashed down with momentum, and the strong wind came blowing. "That can only be blamed on you for not putting any pressure on me." With a flick of Black Maria's finger, the spider web with top hardness and stickiness directly turned the long sword back. He clenched the knuckles tightly in his hand, mixed with alloy technology, and gave a punch with the ability of flames, enveloping Haki, and blasting directly. Smoothie's complexion changed, and he subconsciously raised his long sword to block. The flame instantly entangled the spider web, instantly eliminating the juiced water given by the long sword. Immediately afterwards, a terrifying force like a mountain torrent came back from the blade, which made her unable to bear the brakes and slammed into the boat pole a few meters away, directly bending the wooden stake of the watchtower. Maria did not pursue the victory, but joked with a smile, "I'm just a geisha serving by Mrs. Moda's side. I didn't expect that the little girl could suppress the second in command of Fang Guo's famous dessert general." There is some mental shock in the tone. "I wanted to have fun with you at first, but it seems that the reinforcements from the beasts have indeed arrived as expected, so I should get serious. What's the meaning?" Hearing this, Smoothie hurriedly got up, and then suddenly pulled away the distance from Maria, thinking of something. His face turned from astonishment to ugly in an instant. "Don't you think that you can go to war with us based on your nations?" Maria licked the corner of her mouth seductively, and said with a mocking smile, "We have known about the so-called alliance for a long time, and the target of this war was not you when it started. Of course, it won't be Kaido. You are the cake to be eaten, and they are the competitors who are settled in advance." As he said that, Maria's half-spider, half-human ancient rose tarantula form changed again directly under the influence of the deeper level of ability. Transform back into a tall and sexy human form again, but it is different from the original one. The off-shoulder kimono turned into a layer of purple-black armor, with spider web patterns on the forehead, and even the face was covered by a carapace. Under the eyes, there are 4 small eyes that grow out. Behind the armor, there are 3 pairs of purple-black spider legs. The arms have also become similar spears, and there is a layer of terrifying purple-black light on them. Seeing this, Smoothie took a breath, not wanting to accept the difficult truth. The fruit is awakened. Correct answer. Reward. Even the voice changed. Maria was tall, but her speed was not slow, and she suddenly attacked Smoothie. It is equivalent to 8 tentacles, each of which comes with a terrifying poison and a spider web's predatory nature. Especially the physical bonus after awakening, it is hard for Smoothie to be beaten. After several confrontations, his body was stabbed with a few superficial wounds, seemingly unharmed, but the surface of Smoothie's body was covered in bruises, purples and blacks. In just a few minutes of fighting, Smoothie couldn't move and was defeated. Although having the squeezed fruit can expel the toxin, Maria, who was the first to add the paralyzing toxin, couldn't give the opponent any chance to manipulate it. In the final analysis, this is the degree to which the fruit has not yet awakened, and the chi has not passed the level. Leaving aside the former, the mighty Haki can completely cancel the effect of Devil Fruit's ability. Looking at Smoothie, who was almost unable to fight without any emotion, Maria waved her hand directly, and the opponent was immediately entangled in spider webs, wrapped like a mummy. After taking care of the second in command of General Star, Maria immediately looked at the Brachiosaurus and the animal army that began to wreak havoc on the battlefield. Little ones, crush them for me. In the absence of Kaido and Jhin, as the commander temporarily, Quinn's voice sounded like thunder on the battlefield where the beasts were handed over. Kill. On the side of the ship after meeting, tens of thousands of pirates rushed to kill them, firing salvos. Get rid of them. Show them what Zone is capable of. Ignoring the howling sound, Wanokuna's most important combat power, Shinta, Manba, etc. cultivated by Zone and Smile, also began to unleash a beast-like offensive. Zone's physique blessing, coupled with the fact that these animal legions are all trained to master the armed forces, has the capital to fight against the Wano-kuni army to a certain extent. Is Wano-kuni raising a bunch of monsters? Quinn, who did not choose to participate in the battle, but watched the battle like a military, saw that the Zone army was suppressing the Wano-kuni army, but still complained dissatisfied. The Animal Legion plus the rest of the powerful players who can use Haki, there are thousands of units. This can be regarded as the main elite of their 100 beasts, but in this side-to-side battle, they only competed with the enemy, forming a good advantage. Not even the unrivaled charge of the beast tide do it. These battles are not the most important samurai group and 9 snake group in Wano-kuni. Even, just like Hancock before, some unarmed combat power candidates began to show up after the 100 beasts group took action. In one of the main areas that meet, the wind is howling, and the area that looks like a battlefield in the underworld has started to fall layers of snowflakes. Countless pirates were amazed by it. The snowflakes flashed and suddenly turned into a black-haired figure, and the saber also appeared in his hands after condensing like snowflakes. Yu Shui Wan Ren. Straits of invisible sword energy flew around and turned into scattered snowflakes, which seemed to have no attack power, but when the snowflakes flew towards the pirates of the 100 beasts, several figures were ruthlessly torn apart by the sharp blades. The white deck rendered by snowflakes, combined with a piece of bright red. I saw flesh and blood flying across the field, broken limbs and broken arms scattered all over the ground, and more than 200 pirates were smashed to pieces under the ravages of sword energy, and died unexpectedly. Some pirates with broken arms and legs did not die, lying on the ground, howling and moaning in pain. Bastard, it's you, Snow Warrior Yao Yi. Seeing this, Quinn yelled angrily, but when the sound was undecided, another tall figure beside him screamed and rushed forward. Under the huge curved teeth, it directly turned into a huge mammoth, trampling towards Yao Yi heavily. For this reason, the deck wailed in pain and trembled uncontrollably, causing many affected combatants to be directly thrown into the sea. Facing the mammoth that was charging towards him, Yao Yi didn't dare to stand up hard, and suddenly his body turned into a snowflake, and then suddenly appeared from midair and slashed to the back of the mammoth, making a sound of a solid object colliding. The next moment, Jack let out a howl in pain. Yao Yi stepped back on the sail, looked at the mammoth below, and began to judge. The skin color is very hard to match with the weapon, but when the emission flower is used, the effect is still obvious. Seeing the newly promoted Jack the Drow being crushed and beaten by a combat power reserve, Jhin also didn't make a move under the great swordsman. This is not the direction that the victory battlefield should have. Quinn suddenly turned his heart away, ignoring the remaining pirates of his own side, and shouted, "Fire! Use biochemical weapons." Hearing his order, the pirates on the bow were startled and fired directly. Now it's a scuffle, isn't it going to blow up your brothers too? Isn't it better to inform the allies first, Lord Quinn? The pirate with the muzzle couldn't help but ask. There was no time for his subordinates to continue asking questions. Seeing that they were unmoved, Quinn raised his voice again and shouted, "If you dare to defy me, I will kill him now." He didn't intend to explain in advance. After all, an unexpected plague can make the virus spread better. What's more, those important animal ability users are not affected much, and they need as many subordinates as they need. For the sake of winning the war, he absolutely doesn't care. The beast pirates fought a cold war, setting up forts one after another, preparing to bomb. So a round of plague bombs was fired violently under the gritted teeth of the beast artillery. After landing, there was no explosion sound, but suddenly turned into various gases and drifted away. Under this effect, not only the members of the beast's pirates who rushed off the ship, but also the army of all nations under the melee, and the Wano-kuni soldiers were also directly infected. Pieces of green fluorescence appeared directly on their bodies, and the infected pirate soldiers began to feel hot all over helplessly. The high temperature will gradually spread to the whole body, and there will be pain like bathing in fire. Many people started to gush out blood, and in just a few minutes, they began to vomit blood, stared wide-eyed and died tragically. Are they crazy? What are you doing? Aren't we allies? This is a plague bomb, Quinn's notorious biological weapon. It's Lord Quinn's weapon, put on your protective clothing. Damn it. Why didn't you tell me in advance? It's too late, help me. Countless people who were infected with the virus began to panic, and the virus spread directly and rapidly under the action contact. Seeing this, the beast pirates who fired the cannonballs couldn't help but tremble in their hearts. The horrible and miserable scene made their hands holding the cannons tremble. And Quinn laughed cheerfully. That's it, continue. On the battlefield, the regiment is the terror of the plague. As he said that, he couldn't help turning into a huge brachiosaurus, and jumped up and down a few times excitedly, causing the front of the boat to swing down due to gravity. In the battle, the girl who turned into a white wolf directly blocked the enemy with an ice shield, then grabbed the frustrated dinosaur behind and said, "That guy Quinn is going crazy again, Xiaopei, let's get out of here first." In the situation where the beasts and the 10,000 kingdoms can hardly restrain Wano-kuna's military strength, the virus infection is the best way to break the deadlock. After watching Wano-kuni finally have an infection on a conspicuous scale, Quinn opened his mouth even more, and a machine gun Gatling appeared directly from under the semi-mechanical body, and all kinds of biochemical plagues were in it. Cruelty and excitement flashed in his eyes, and he was about to continue launching when he suddenly noticed something. From the air yacht in the direction of Wano-kuni, it seems that a group of troops with strange costumes descended. This group of about a few hundred troops is all wearing the same special costumes except for the different colors. Of course, it was not these that attracted his attention, but this group of troops, who seemed to be equipped with something to hit them, came out of the yacht one by one, but they flew in the air as if they were stepping on the air. As a scientist, Quinn quickly noticed something. Those are not ordinary clothes, they are equipped with special equipment blessings. Is it still equipped with a floating device? Then it will just blow up the ship for you. After Quinn grinned, he fired all the biochemical weapons into the air from the Gatling cannon in his mouth. But it wasn't just flying. The personnel in the special forces wearing red and blue combat uniforms stepped forward immediately, swung out hot flames and lightning strikes, and bombarded Vice Admiral biochemical weapons in midair. The virus that exploded did not rage with the wind of war. Instead, another purple troop in the battlesuit suddenly expanded its huge suction force, directly sucking the huge amount of plague into the outer surface of the suit, and then assimilated it without any impact. Huh? What's going on? Did you directly absorb Laozi's plague? Quinn, who originally wanted to witness the powerful scene he created, couldn't help but move excitedly. Hey, it's not easy for this genius to figure out the carrier of the plague and absorb the so-called toxin. With wild laughter and a boastful tone, Quinn knew who the other party was without looking back. With a powerful armed color attached, the tail of Brachiosaurus swiped to the right. Brachiosaurus physique combined with powerful haki, even rocks can be easily crushed, but at this moment, the tail is blocked by another powerful force. This time, Quinn couldn't help turning the huge dragon body, and soon saw Geisa who was floating aside with gas, and Maria who was also huge. His expression couldn't help but change. On the battlefield, he knew that the monster-like woman in front of him was fighting with Smoothie, the second in command of the General of all nations. Appearing in front of him now, doesn't it mean that Smoothie has already lost? What was even more shocking was when the other party crossed over to the master ship of the beasts he was in, and there was this guy named Guy. Similarly, he also noticed the difference in Maria, not only the animal armor on the animal after awakening, but also the costumes of those special forces. It's the enemy, attack. After seeing Maria, Shinta and others on the main ship immediately stepped forward with a scream, but at the moment of action, the white battle suit on Maria's body immediately turned into black, and then the huge body disappeared miraculously. Shinta, who stepped forward to attack, froze for a moment, and was pierced by an invisible attack the next moment. Until there was a glorious change, Maria flicked the arms of the Shintas who had penetrated directly, causing them to die of poison within a few breaths. Stealth? Quinn screamed strangely, but didn't dare to continue to save Haki's thoughts, and his knowledge immediately covered him. Then he looked vigilantly at the battlesuit on Maria's body and said, "Is that clothes playing tricks?" Tarantulas don't have the ability to be invisible, plus the ability to change in a wide range suddenly displayed by the special forces before. It is enough to know that it is the special changes given by those clothes. Heh heh heh, did you notice that, Quinn? Guy smiled and opened his hands. This is the battlesuit that Judge had been dreaming of, but I made it one step ahead, and even got a stronger play than his concept. Originally, he only planned to observe this war, and use the mechanical army to show himself in the world after the Whitebeard War. But when he saw the plague, he thought of Quinn who was in the scientific army together. Although they are hostile forces now, the viral medicines that the two love have had similar smells for a while. Of course, he didn't come here to intercede, but wanted to show off in front of the creation of the battlesuit and the scientists he once knew well. Battlesuit. Quinn immediately replied with something, and matched it with lightning, flame, invisibility, toxin, and clothes of corresponding colors. Isn't this the comic ability of the Germa Legion that Judge said? Quinn couldn't help but quickly turned his head to look. On the battlefield, the troops in combat uniforms had already joined the battlefield. Flame Thunder, attacking in a large area, constantly sweeps up the rubbish on the battlefield. The green battlesuit also corresponded to the powerful force, and directly relied on the human body to forcibly crush several huge beasts in the animal army with hammers. There is even a kind of white troop that scattered dandelion-like balls of light in the sky, and the wounded Wanokuni who received the gift immediately showed improvement in their injuries. Even his previous plague infection was directly controlled and eliminated by this sudden army. Wanokuna's battlesuit is directly comparable to the addition of fruits, and the number is extremely considerable. In this way, Quinn's face immediately turned ugly. That possibility that could change the situation of the war disappeared. There is also Guy showing off his displeasure. This kind of technology is even more advanced than his semi-mechanical transformation. Whoosh! Zizi! The flames and lightning points were immediately given under Maria's arms, and the 3 pairs of spider legs behind her opened at the same time, emitting terrifying toxins, dripping down, making the deck melt and corrode when it touched it. The battlesuit on his body also immediately turned into a combination of 7 colors. Undoubtedly, this is the sum of the blessings of each special ability. It is also equipped with the awakened form of the tarantula, which already has other terrifying abilities. Are you kidding? At worst, Laozi will directly snatch the battlesuit from you? Under Quinn's roar, the huge Brachiosaurus also directly awakened and turned into a human dragon form. Wedding Fist. The mechanical arm of Quinn's right hand burned, and the hot mechanical claws immediately attacked Maria. The 2 spider legs on the back immediately opened up, forming a powerful spider web shield, directly blocking Quinn's blow. At the same time, the arms of Flame and Thunder were wrapped around, and they quickly stabbed at Quinn. Hey, have you forgotten me? I'm not just explaining. Guy let go of his hand and waved violently, giving the gas bonus on his body, and it was directly entangled at the moment the attack fell. A terrifying explosion blasted directly between the two of them. Under the battlesuit with memory shape alloy, Maria only took a few steps back. Quinn was blasted out directly with severe pain, and slammed into the interior of the ship, destroying a lot of equipment. Damn, it hurts, bastard Guy. This kind of violent explosion at close range is even comparable to the blow that brother Kaido gave him in a rage. Is this going to work together to deal with me? Because of the pain, Quinn also became a little angry. That's right, but the so-called combined force is not just us. Maria's huge figure stood out again. Relying on her knowledge and perception of the breath of creatures, Quinn quickly dodged to avoid the invisible attack. A large area of the floor was instantly corroded, and Maria swung it away violently, and the deck within tens of meters was blown away by terrifying force. But under the entanglement of spider webs, the flying deck directly turned into countless fixed corners, trapped and locked in the surrounding space. Maria flicked a flame in her hand, and countless solid spider webs immediately ignited everywhere like a demon, instantly turning the cabin into a sea of flames. Under the burning, white smoke rose up. In this case, what about attacks that are not creatures? Quinn didn't understand the other party's idea of creating this environment, and didn't intend to ask. His hands suddenly popped out of the rocket muzzle and aimed at Maria. However, he saw something looming in the white mist. Immediately afterwards, a creepy feeling immediately spread throughout the body. Quinn wanted to dodge suddenly, but he was a step too late. From the corner of his head, a white phantom head passed under his body with a playful smile. On the somewhat deadlocked battlefield below, at a high altitude, Moda and Big Mom are still fighting fiercely. Moda. Amidst the roar that was as sharp as a ghost, Big Mom used the lightsaber to support the slashed Shu Sakura. A sword mark was swept across his body instantly under the force of the sword, but he quickly recovered from the injury under the exhaustion of the soul. At the same time, he grabbed the opening of Moda's shot, and suddenly punched Moda's shoulder. Boom. Moda didn't dodge or dodge, and quickly raised his fist and rushed towards the pounding punch. There was an explosion-like sound in the air, which was no less than a full-strength blow from a giant. Charlotte Linlin, who was in full strength at this time, under the collision of Liwang, Moda Luffy was only allowed a short distance. Maybe he can't compare with these natural monsters in terms of physique, but after tempering the day after tomorrow, at least he has weakened his biggest weakness of climbing the 7 summit as much as possible. Compared to before, when Charlotte Linlin's lifespan is only 1 year, Haki's blessing at a low level of strength requires Moda to use his full-strength sword power to compete with Haki. But now, even without full-on Autumn Sakura and sword power, just relying on Haki and strength is just a negligible inferiority. Your strength is getting weaker and weaker. With a sneer on Moda's face, staring at the fat and ugly face that is close at hand, compared to 9 years ago, now it is more like the aging appearance in the original book after more than 20 years. Especially in the 2 encounters with him, the overuse of lifespan. Arrogance. Charlotte Linlin has disheveled hair and a ferocious face like a demon crawling out of hell. I let you run away in Cake Island before, you are lucky. This time, I will not give you such a chance again. After the voice fell to Setsuna, the power of the soul in her body was injected crazily, and under the blessing of the Ming light sword, it released a bright and dazzling purple light. Gun of Albaf Waiguo, amidst the deafening roar, endless aura suddenly erupted all around, and a suffocating sense of oppression, with the blade falling, only pressed towards Moda. The terrifying gigantic sword energy shockwave, after consuming one's own lifespan and soul blessing, was several times larger than the original sword energy and power, abruptly shattering all the surrounding air, and the clouds even flew away under the impact. The way of the sword is not about physique, it's simply about strength. Laugh. At the same time as the deep voice sounded, Shu Sakura instantly entered the attack mode, and Moda slashed out from left to right, setting off a terrifying airwave. Under the impact, it suddenly turned into a dazzling sword energy, which lit up the entire sky in an instant. And under this berserk impact, the mighty power that was rushing towards him was instantly extinguished. And the lightsaber that Charlotte Linlin slashed was also firmly slashed by Shu Sakura. The destructive power of Sakura in the attacking form, the terror multiplied after absorbing Haki, directly caused the flames and lightning on the surface of the Minguang blade to even slowly fade away. Mother. The 3 souls of the Ming light sword screamed in pain. Obviously in the collision of this sword, the origin of the soul was severely injured. However, naturally, Charlotte Linlin didn't care about their status when the battle situation was going to this level. She forcibly poured in a large amount of soul power again, roughly repaired the lightning sword in an instant, shook the sword away again, and then slashed. Moda flew under the figure and waved directly. The moisture in the air was directly extracted by the lion fruit, and then suddenly multiplied into water balls, which fell to the surface of the Ming lightsaber. In an instant, Charlotte Linlin felt the 3 separate souls of her body, and she felt a sense of weakness. Seawater? Charlotte Linlin asked angrily. Moda didn't answer, and with the doubled speed, he directly slashed at the opponent who could only defend. Clang. The sound of metal and iron colliding was heard, and 2 incomparably powerful forces collided and rolled. Ming lightsaber in a weak state is naturally tired, not to mention that under the influence of Sakura, it is 2 concepts compared with the previous countermove. 1 cut. Under Charlotte Linlin's eyes that turned from anger to fear, Ming lightsaber let out a painful cry just like himself, and directly turned into a soul body and shattered. Although Haki is strong to a certain extent, it can ignore Devil Fruit's ability. But as long as you are capable, you can't ignore a natural enemy like seawater. The corners of Moda's mouth slightly curled up, revealing a sarcastic smile. Hockey's one-on-one play has unexpected fruit effects, but it is also a wonderful auxiliary usage. Speaking of this, his eyes suddenly burst into a ball of light, and with a touch of his toes, he suddenly rose into the air, and at the same time, he turned his right wrist and slashed upwards with the sword blade. Just give it a try, your trick, Charlotte Linlin. Al Buff's gun. Waiguo. Amid the stern shouts, a white jade-like sword energy formed in an instant, slashing at the opponent from the air with a momentum of pulling mountains and filling seas. Compared with the Soul Blessing, Moda has Momo's boost, coupled with the top swordsman's grasp of the situation. An even more powerful and terrifying slash slammed down in front of Charlotte Linlin. In the whistling, a terrifying attack was already in front of him. The violent fluctuations have already begun to make her steel balloon-like skin feel the tingling sensation of sharp blades from time to time. Charlotte Linlin couldn't help but recall the Cake Island, and the outcome was roughly the same. With a look of bewilderment, he crossed his hands and gave him a powerful armed color blessing. Boom. The huge explosive sound resounded through the sky of the entire sea area for a while. Countless sword chi swept through the airflow, and the sky was turned into crack-like impact marks under the slash. The space seems to be broken by this blow. Under the erupting terrifying sword energy, a fat figure was shot down uncontrollably. Its mom. Big Mom is overwhelmed by Air General. Countless people on the battlefield shouted, and at the same time, several children of the Charlotte family quickly rushed towards Charlotte Linlin, who was charging downwards. The speed of the rapid impact, but after seeing the moment, it was already too late. Boom. Charlotte's body directly hit the ships on the battlefield from a height of hundreds of meters. Countless people were directly blown away by the impact of the fall, and the powerful airwaves came like a strong wind, blowing off the flags, boats and poles one by one. Immediately afterwards, seawater emerged from the loud noise. As a top-level ship, the deck was directly pierced by the impact. What is even more concerning is that Charlotte Linlin, who took the soul fruit, was shot into the sea. The Battle of Kings is no different from the most dazzling core of the feature film war. Even if the speed of the landing is too fast, it is only for a moment, but it is enough for people to distinguish who is defeated in the confrontation. After witnessing this scene, everyone on the side of Big Mom Wan Gojin was stunned. The eldest son, Perispero, who was closest to him, suddenly let out a shrill scream after a brief absence, and then ran like crazy to the ship that slowly began to sink because the deck was directly blasted through. It seems beyond doubt that our general won. With a majestic armed crutch, Lafitte slammed it down with a stick, forcefully healing the impatient Perispero. Seeing this, Perispero didn't dare to be careless, and suddenly turned into a piece of syrup, blocking the opponent's attack. He didn't dare to resist Lafitte's attack at all. Not only is the opponent's armed force strong, but also its attack can have a heavy damage effect. As long as there is a momentary loophole in the body's armed protection, it will be bound by its terrifying hypnosis immediately. Under the surrounding forces wrapped in syrup, not only the pirate soldiers and others, but also those family members who had already suffered losses and were controlled. Immediately after clapping his hands, countless soldiers from all nations around him began to attack Perispero uncontrollably. Gritting his teeth angrily, Perispero could only look anxiously in the direction blocked by Lafitte. However, at this moment, out of the corner of his eye, he suddenly noticed that there were countless fuzzy white light groups in front of him, floating towards the sky, and gradually disappeared without a trace. That's the souls of homies. Perispero realized something instantly. He turned his head and looked around with trembling lips. As expected, he saw many homies soldiers who belonged to the army of all nations, created by the soul fruit, suddenly turned into countless dust out of thin air, and disappeared between the sky and the earth. These are not the abilities created by the mother's body soul, but soldiers created by empowerment. In the current situation, there is no doubt that the mother not only fell into the sea, but also her consciousness may have directly fallen into a coma due to the severe trauma. Linlin was defeated. Kaido, who was also aware of something, suddenly climbed to a new peak with momentum, and the terrifying air wave directly shocked Yamato and Hancock away. He stared angrily, a little in disbelief. Originally, he wanted to defeat these two brats who knew how to stalk, and then go to support Linlin. Unexpectedly, the opponent was defeated so quickly. Although due to the continuous birth, the strength has declined seriously. But with his natural physique and the blessing of the sacrificial soul, Kaido will be hammered in a short period of time, and even in a long battle for several hours, Kaido is not sure that he can completely defeat Charlotte Linlin. Kaido compares himself, so the result is that the Moda in front of him has surpassed himself and reached a higher level? Moda landed from the high-altitude battlefield, and then he had already locked the breath of the sea below, and made a grabbing movement with his right hand. Boom. The seawater began to riot. The terrifying fluttering ability directly and forcefully lifts up the seawater, which devil fruit fears most, without any influence. Layers upon layers of turbulent waves surged up, and the seawater pulled up turned into a push force, wave after wave to block it. The countless soldiers of all nations and beasts who went into the water to save people before were directly swept by the rolled-up waves. And in the center of the huge seawater that was pulled up, Charlotte Linlin, who had lost consciousness and was completely wrapped in seawater, was trapped and locked in it. In it, one can even see Charlotte Linlin's miserable appearance at the moment. The clothes on his body were destroyed by the terrifying sword force, and there was a huge sword mark on his body after cutting through the steel skin. Under the bloodline dyed red, even the surrounding area looked like a sea of blood. Charlotte Linlin used to have a huge body of more than 10 meters, but now she has returned to her original form, and her pink hair has directly entered a completely gray and white appearance. Excessive consumption of soul and lifespan, coupled with severe injuries under Moda's authority, Charlotte Linlin was directly forced into a state of old age. Seeing this, Kaido below had a sudden emotional change, and even directly transformed into a terrifying dragon man form through awakening. Haki began to emerge from his body, and the surrounding ship decks shattered without any movement. David Thunder 8 trigrams, Kaido moved suddenly, and his figure disappeared out of thin air. That's an ultimate speed that doesn't match Kaido's huge body at all. The purple electric light wrapped around the mace was even compressed into a purple line galloping towards Moda in an instant. Then the terrifying Thunderbolt Kylin and the Tempest Kick, who turned into flying snakes under the tyrant's entanglement, instantly intercepted this terrorist attack involving various emotions. The forces from different directions collided head-on in this way. The attacks of Yamato and Hancock were directly swung away by under the heavy force of Kaido, but in the case of weakened power, Moda easily blocked it with a single lift of the sword. The aftermath generated by the collision split the surrounding atmosphere into countless strong winds. Boom. After the attack was resisted, it was accompanied by a deafening gas explosion. The muscles of Kaido's arms suddenly exerted force, like playing baseball, with great force. He was blessed on the mace. However, he was not affected by any force impact, so Moda only retreated a certain distance, and deflected the attack forcefully. Why, your alliance is doomed, and Charlotte Linlin is even more doomed. Do you want to continue fighting? Lousy. I owe her a huge debt of gratitude. Kaido didn't talk about the benefits at this time. Beasts unilaterally tore up the cooperation chain. And during these decades of wandering, Charlotte Linlin has a very meaningful position in Kaido's heart, but the rivalry between each other makes this relationship not so pure. Of course, the more important thing is that since the choice was made, and the strength he built over the years was used for it, how could it be possible that Charlotte Linlin would still be defeated like this? The alliance of the two emperors originally relied not only on the combination of forces of the two forces. Moda also understands this truth. Before the battlefield, he naturally thought about the situation of uniting against the double emperors. But not all events have indeed developed as expected. Even he didn't know that the speed of Kaido's support and the speed of the opponents rushing over were directly blocked by his two trump cards. This can be said to be one of the biggest surprises Moda felt on the battlefield. It's a pity that I can't feel the Qiwuhai of the combination skills of the two. Of course, compared to the tempering of the confrontation of moves and the pressure of dealing with the double emperor, it may be possible for him to improve and grow gradually. But compared to these, Moda is more willing to lean towards the degree of victory in the war. With a lift of her hand, Charlotte Linlin, who was submerged in seawater, was immediately separated. Mother. Seeing this, someone in the 10,000 Nations army shouted for it. The next moment, at the airship, the seastone coffin that had already been equipped was placed at the main ship. Without any resistance, Charlotte Linlin was directly brought into it and passed into the cabin. Capture? Kaido raised the same idea as many people, but he didn't think too much about it. No matter what Moda wants to do, at least for now, Linlin can't see a chance. But now, the war is coming to an end. Without the homies' soldiers, the strength of the combination is directly reduced by half, and it is impossible to delay the time for a short time by relying on the number. Kaido glanced down. Jhin was still fighting hard, and Quin's aura had fallen into a relatively weak state. Again, Kaido looked back at Moda. Unexpectedly, the other party could actually bring the dilapidated Wano-kuni, who was only a good samurai, to the army that directly suppressed both him and Linlin. He couldn't help but think that Moda, who was just an ordinary person at sea at the time, came to his base camp on Ghost Island for discussion alone. Perhaps from that moment on, the so-called future had direction and premeditation in the eyes of this man. Reading this, Kaido couldn't help smiling, and Long Tong looked deeply at Moda. "You guy, you really remind me of that terrifying man, but I don't know whether you will become him or surpass him in the future." At this moment, he didn't listen to Kaido's heartfelt words, and Moda didn't know what happened to Kaido's thoughts. But for the man Kaido mentioned, he can guess who it is. Originally, he had no other thoughts about Kaido and its forces. Although the man-made devil fruit has been successfully sent to the world government, the role of Kaido's link has been reduced by half. But this group of people are real fighters. Such a force, compared to the Bai Tuan and Wan Guo who play every game, can make waves in the chaotic world, and thus have an impact on the world government. But now that the other party has taken the initiative to tear up the agreement, it is impossible to just let the other party leave alive. Some of the forces under his command are okay, but a king like Kaido must be eradicated. I don't care who the man you're talking about is, or your relationship with Charlotte Linlin. Moda held a sword in the air, but since you want to continue, then come. As he spoke, Moda looked at Yamato and Hancock who were also attacking. Yamato, take a good look, and as for Hancock, go and accept your abilities. Under the action of the two women obeying, Kaido's aura exploded again. Since he didn't choose to leave after Charlotte Linlin's loss, Kaido had already made a decision in his heart. Don't think about how much haki wasted after the opponent defeated Linlin. A red light loomed in the angry dragon eyes. Afterwards, Long Wei, together with his beast-like aura, appeared unscrupulously through his body, constantly vibrating the shenji of the surrounding ships out of thin air. Kaido looked at Moda, and a fighting spirit suddenly appeared on his rough face. Only when he fights against the strong can he feel fun in the battle. The mace with the purple lightning coiled horizontally, accompanied by Kaido's momentum, exudes a palpitating and dangerous atmosphere. With the impact of Kaido's sudden explosion, the deck under his feet was directly shattered into two halves. Holding the mace tightly, the muscles in his right arm swelled more than a circle. The berserk haki seemed to be all concentrated on this point, and the unstoppable blow fell heavily towards Moda. A horrifying aura also gathered together. Moda instantly held the knife and slashed towards Kaido's attack. The violent airwave raised by the mace collided heavily with Chu Sakura's sword energy, and the surrounding light was instantly distorted, and even the void seemed to be torn apart by the storm. Under the roaring attack, Kaido's complexion suddenly changed and he was overjoyed by the terrifying power contained in it. Haki suddenly vented to Kaji. Boom! Click! After the stalemate between the two sides changed for a second, there seemed to be a cracking sound coming from the air. The atmosphere began to violently riot. The surrounding air exploded because of this, and even the crowd who were avoiding the battle far below were inevitably blown away by the powerful airflow of the explosion. Kaido's face was ferocious, with bulging veins all over his body, and the explosive force made the sound of breaking through the air layer after layer continuously burst out around him. But if it's just a comparison of strength, how can Kaido at this time be comparable to Charlotte Linlin's giant form after depleting life? Just with the power of the sword, Moda easily equaled Kaido. Even when retracting is more comfortable than the opponent, he suddenly retracted Aki Sakura, a skillful deflection, and at the same time that deflected Kaido's attack, Aki Sakura has turned into a terrifying speed. Under the defensive speed where he couldn't change hands immediately, Kaido could only move his head away quickly, so as to minimize the impact of the attack. In the case of completely destroying Kaido's armed color, the slash directly sliced open Kaido's chest, and at the same time, the burst of sword momentum slammed past his deviated head. The symbolic corner, accompanied by blood and roars, broke and fell to the ground. The hideous wound seemed to be wriggling, giving the impression that it was slowly healing. Kaido covered his wound in embarrassment. He could feel the difference in the damage caused by Moda. Not only is it more powerful, but it also affects his recovery from injuries. It's like the remnants of sword energy. She is still causing much damage to the body under the attack that has ended. Kaido is stronger than Charlotte Linlin's steel balloons and natural monsters, especially because of the terrifying resilience, endurance and other physiques awakened by the Phantom Beast. But today's Moda is most afraid of this kind of existence. This is one of the fundamental reasons why it is not afraid of the so-called Double Emperor Alliance. He can even say, in the case of singles, you are better than Charlotte Linlin. Since the focus of the battle between Moda and Charlotte Linlin, the battle between Kaido and the Air General is also under the spotlight. Originally, everyone could feel the battle at the beginning. The two were like an evenly matched confrontation, and every time they fought, there were fluctuations that could not be ignored or underestimated. But it only takes a few minutes. Kaido's huge body like a demon god was being attacked by a figure that was much smaller than him and retreated repeatedly, falling into an extremely obvious disadvantage. While fighting, Jhin couldn't believe it under his gaze. Even if he lost to the Air General, Kaido-sama shouldn't be like this. What's more, Moda has been fighting against Big Mom for a relatively long time before. Whether it is physical strength or haki, Master Kaido should have an advantage. Seems to know that the opponent's mind is turning during the battle, and a slash wave directly stepped forward to answer his question. Whether it is haki or swordsmanship, you are very strong, especially with the power and speed of the ancient seed blessing. There are also abilities such as flames, which are indeed enough to make you the #1 disaster in the 100 beasts. But in terms of swordsmanship, you haven't taken the step of a great swordsman, so you don't know how to use the power in this realm. And that's General Moda, the powerful who can sit on the throne of the world's #1 swordsman. Mihawk rarely explained during the battle, or because he also noticed that Moda suppressed Kaido at the moment, and was more or less affected by this. Sky. Deck. The two figures, like lightning, kept colliding with each other wherever they could stand. But Kaido, who was slowly changing from attacking to being forced to parry, snarled while dodging the slash with some difficulty. How did you do it? Such a strange attack. He has seen many slashes from strong swordsmen, Roger Golden Lion, Odin. I have personally experienced the latter too. But compared to those powerful slashes that caused conspicuous scars, while Moda is powerful, it also contains terrible persistence. Even if it is a wound that hurts flesh and blood, in the current awakened state, even if the wound has not healed, the pain has long since disappeared. But now, not to mention the fact that the wounds of flesh and blood are recovering dozens of times slower than in the past, it is even the injuries he received in the first place, and there are still bursts of stinging pain like a knife. It was as if there was still a vague and sharp knife edge, constantly drilling into the scar. Kaido can still continue to grit his teeth and fight with his resilience. The damage of this blessing has been continuously increased, and he has been forced to specialize in defense. Fruit and swordsmanship. Moda didn't make it clear. Continue to slash out a series of amazingly powerful sword chi, making Kaido's situation worse. As long as haki is strong enough, he can nullify the fruit's ability. This comes from Kaido's statement that haki is above all else. But haki, who is under the force of my sword, you can't defend against the infiltration of the fruit. The moment the voice fell, Moda's sword did not move, and a horrifying sword movement seemed to be visibly circling around him. Just reached out and flicked, like a sudden burst from the invisible, towards the direction of Kaido, and exploded. Sensing the terrifying power contained in the roaring aura, Kaido's complexion suddenly changed. He had a premonition that in his current situation, if he suffered a blow, the phenomenon that he could still maintain would instantly fall into a more serious disadvantage. Call. The mace rushed into the wind, and with a premonition, it swung away from the sound of breaking through the air. The invisible sword was instantly blown apart by a hammer. Immediately afterwards, click. A thick crack suddenly appeared on the top of the mace, and immediately spread downward at a speed visible to the naked eye. In just a few breaths, the mace that accompanied Kaido on his sea journey for several years shattered in his astonished eyes. Call out. Immediately afterwards, the speed was so fast that it was difficult to react, and there was an obvious sound of breaking through the air. The invisible sword struck Kaido's wound head-on. The latter's face changed again in shock. The development of paramecia fruit sometimes requires imagination, Kaido. Moda pressed his index finger and thumb lightly, as if grabbing something invisible in the void. He smiled, and then said, especially when it comes to awakening, in the battle between the strong, the massive attack is not easy to cause an effect, but the key small effect is more likely to cause unexpected effects when people ignore it. Reaction. As long as I think about it, even this sword power, I can easily control it through the fruit, even if it is buried in your body and causes continuous damage. In battle, Kaido, whose mind is relatively emotional, suddenly knows something. The remaining pain in the body is the effect of Moda's multiplied attacks, which have been expanding slowly, so that his recovery power can be offset and slowed down. And when I found out from Moda, it was already too late. It was like a sign that the internal injuries accumulated before had reached a complete outbreak. Kaido clutched the wound violently, coughing up a big mouthful of blood. At this moment, Moda is already flying in the air suddenly, and under the increased speed, it seems to have traveled a distance, and in the blink of an eye, it has turned into an afterimage and swept over Kaido's head. Haki fell into autumn in an instant, and Sakura, attacking with swords gathered at one point, appeared in front of Kaido as if across the space. Knowing that it would be difficult to dodge, Kaido curled up with scales, and Haki unfolded all of them in an instant. At the same time, he also knew that when Haki concentrated on the attack on Moda, his eyes were full of violence. Blast towards Moda's belly. Rumble. With the Setsuna smashed out by Kaido in one move, under the terrifying entanglement, it seemed that the sky was once again thundering for it. Moda insists on going on, even if he gets hurt a little for this, it's okay. But with this sword, he can directly tell the winner. It was a sword the size of Sakura, not even reaching a third of Kaido's chest. The sword power contained in it exploded suddenly, as if the whole sky was taken over by it. The momentum of the sword energy was so powerful that it overwhelmed the thunder above the sky for a while, but what replaced it was the solemnity that froze the air. Ultimate's attack, coupled with the multiple swords that Momo directly acts on. Call out. The attack seemed to go straight across Kaido. Rumble. The warships of all nations in the main direction were easily cut apart several times in a row. The surface of the sea exploded in an instant, startling the monstrous seawater. However, the terrifying sword force continued to rush towards the bottom of the sea without stopping. Only a few seconds less than. A terrifying gully stretches across the sea area, and the sword intent seems to be still filling the gully, forming an invisible barrier, preventing the seawater on both sides from covering it. Silence. Deathly silence. When Kaido's body directly fell into a broken ruin, Setsuna, almost half of the Beast's pirates crew members in the entire battlefield were attracted, and suddenly fell into a terrible silence. Guy. Master Kaido. After more than 10 seconds, a girl with blue-pink hair who was nearby reacted, ran and crawled all the way, rushed to its side in embarrassment, and looked into it. In the pit that was completely destroyed by a single sword strike, Kaido's huge body covered in cuts and bruises was lying there motionless on his back with his eyes closed. The breath on his body was extremely weak. There was also an extremely huge gap, which hideously covered its entire body. At a glance, one can feel countless broken flesh and blood wriggling indistinctly, and more than half of the clearly visible white bones are broken. And after seeing this scene, the girl who was still holding a little bit of luck, only felt a buzzing sound in her head, as if the world collapsed, showing an expression of disbelief on her face. Master Kaido, you were really defeated. The head of the stage looked at the figure still standing in the sky, his face turned pale for a while, and his lips trembled uncontrollably. This is Master Kaido. Even if he has fought against the strongest man in the world, he has never been injured like this. Covering the wounded abdomen that was attacked by Kaido, without any armed color, even with the current physique to forcefully eat this crazy attack of Kaido, it is still somewhat unbearable. However, within the acceptable range, he took out a glass tube bottle containing liquid from his arms, and Moda drank the sweet water in one gulp. The injury and state of the body will immediately have a significant recovery effect. With pure gold, Man Shueli's healing ability can be used in other ways. Moda looked at Kaido's position, somewhat surprised. Although it was a continuous attack under the blade, the penetrating power of that momentum should not be underestimated. That's the extent to which Kaido's powerful armed color can still be cut through after being completely defeated. And directly under this move, Kaido is still alive, worthy of the name of the strongest creature. Although he is the Emperor, Moda is the most fearless and the easiest to deal with, such as his powerful resilience and stamina. It is precisely because of these that he survived this ultimate move. However, if he was so embarrassed to retrieve a life like a candle in the wind, the trend of this move would not be surprising. On the battlefield below, the silence began to be broken. It's over now. How so? Not only the girl, but also the rest of the Beast's Pirates members in the 10,000 Nations army, whether they are ordinary pirates or high-level cadres with hundreds of millions of rewards, the Charlotte family reacted similarly at this moment. An emotion of panic and fear spread rapidly in their hearts, making it difficult for these pirates who almost believed in Kaido as a god and regarded Kaido as another hope for a while. The fighting spirit that was burning fiercely not long ago also quickly faded away. Until the 1,000-meter gully that seemed to cut through the full sea, it began to flood the seawater crazily. Countless boats on the sea began to rush into the ravine uncontrollably because of the violent current, and just now there was a panic that was louder than 10. The most terrifying riot from nature, on this endless sea. Everyone knows what it means to be sunk into the bottom of the sea, and to be covered by the seawater with huge waves. Many people put down their weapons one after another and began to flee. The samurai on Wanakuna's side didn't panic. Whether it is the sky or the sea, they are all under the control of their generals. That's the truth. The deeper the degree of awakening and development, the wider the scope of assimilation. Driven only by the mind, the pouring seawater was directly lifted up by Piao Piao's ability, stopping the phenomenon of frantically filling the gully. However, immediately under the invisible force, it suddenly turned into a sea wave that could overwhelm the boarding battle, like a flood of contempt descending from the sky, crushing it. This is straight from Uzumaki, which engulfs ships, to waves that destroy everything, leaving no one a chance to escape. The surrender will not be killed. Under Moda's cold shout, it seemed to spread directly to all areas of the entire boarding battle. Many people looked at the figure in the air. Although they were blessed by some injuries and looked down upon the power of all beings, many people stopped their movements in palpitation. It is not only a powerful force that neither the beasts nor the 10,000 Nations army can deal with, but also the core of both sides. Big Mom Charlotte Linlin, 100 Beasts Kaido, Thunder was killed by 10 people from the opposite city. Even if it wasn't a joint effort to defeat, this record of one person crushing 2 emperors one after another is enough to disdain the entire sea. What did they do wrong that they chose to fight against this terrifying force, especially the 100 Beasts group, which was inserted as a midway force? Hateful. Yan Wanjin only felt a chill down his back, but compared to ordinary cadres, as one of the 3 disasters, he knew better what he should do in this desperate situation. Even if you lose, surrender is a more unacceptable humiliation than death. Especially witnessed step by step with Kaido, the experience of all beasts step by step from big pirates to monsters to emperors of the sea. Beasts pirates. He forcibly suppressed the fear and shock growing in his heart, suddenly distanced himself from Mihawk, turned his head towards the surroundings, and roared with all his might. The 100 beasts only have a body that died in battle. There is no soul to fear. This sentence sounds good, but the effect is not obvious. In the end of failure, not many people are really willing to die. However, many pirates who were really influenced by Kaido's personality and charm could not help but raise their weapons to respond when they heard the words of the big signboard. Even Katakuri couldn't help but look at each other, but after Byrnndi was arrested and Kaido and his mother were defeated, he had already stopped fighting with Gion. Katakuri has made his choice. He can risk his life for the battle, but now that his mother is dead, he has to be the second member of the family to protect the surviving family members. It really makes me feel angry. This is the favor that Lord Moda bestowed on you, but you dare to refuse it. Your souls are useless. An angry shout suddenly sounded from the high-altitude airship. Immediately afterwards, the surrounding environment seemed to rise one after another, white light clusters slowly floated up from everywhere. Wan Gojin is no stranger to this. This is the soul. Could it be that Mother broke free after waking up? Although it is an unrealistic expectation, compared with surrendering, some people naturally expect the reappearance of Charlotte Linlin to bring about a different situation. However, under the eyes of everyone, there is no such a huge body. Immediately afterwards, under the previous speech full of anger, Hancock, who was once named the most beautiful ace of the air general by Shi Bao, stepped on high heels and reappeared from above the airship. That is an impeccable appearance and figure, with a beauty that almost no one can resist, no matter men, women or children. Countless people's hearts skipped a beat, not only because of its stunning beauty, but also because of its terrifying strength against Kaido before. Even at this moment, as if welcoming the birth of a new queen, countless souls floating around began to consciously look around Hancock. 293. Could it be? She went into the fleet where her mother was imprisoned, and it seems like it's been a while. Some people think of Moda's experience, and after experiencing this phenomenon, they can't help but think of something extraordinary. You guys dare to refuse Master Moda's request? You are obviously just a group of monkeys. The anger in my heart is constantly expanding. Along with the anger, even some conquerors were released uncontrollably, swirling an invisible strong wind. Master Snake Princess. The 9 snake female warriors who had transformed into the shape of Hancock couldn't help but shouted in fascination for their angry form. Completely hockey-locked the group of people who refused to admit defeat, Hancock tapped his right index finger on the pink lips, and pulled out a pink heart that was very similar to the sweet fruit in the original book. Moda looked a little surprised. Although he knew that even if he ate the soul fruit, Hancock's fighting style would not be the same as that old woman Junlot Linlin. But I didn't expect that even if she ate the soul fruit instead of the sweet fruit, the tricks she used were similar to the original book. One by one the soul-capturing arrow. Hancock's right hand gestured to draw the bow, clasped it on the peach heart drawn by the left hand, and shot countless arrows in an instant. And under the lock of knowledge and knowledge, directly and consciously attack the identified enemy. According to Jhin's sense of knowledge, these arrows are not fast, but there is a suffocating sense of crisis. Raise your weapon quickly and barely parry it with haki. And the rest of the unlucky ones who were not qualified for haki couldn't dodge the tracking arrows, and were directly hit to the body. The moment the arrows hit these unlucky ghosts, their eyes immediately turned white, and they fell into an unspeakable state. Immediately afterwards, in the body, wisps of air suddenly rose from the skin and rushed towards Hancock. Compared with the soul ball, which is more familiar to Wan Gojin, Parasparrow exclaimed, "This is Mother's soul spell." Not only him, but also members of the Charlotte family such as Katakuri, who can't see that this is exactly what my mother used to punish people. Mom died. Mom's soul fruit was taken away by her. Everyone was shocked, and what was unacceptable was the crowd watching from Saboti Archipelago. Headquarters. Great news. Wanokuni has confirmed that she has the ability to take other people's fruits. Empress Charlotte Linlin died in battle, and her fruit ability was taken away by the main card Hancock of the Air General. At this moment, Hancock, who was directly under the attention of all people, yanked the captured soul. Gather it in your hand, gradually compress this profound soul ability on your index finger, and make a pistol movement. The Conqueror's haki is wrapped around it, aiming at the flame disaster below. The soul emits flames, burns and shoots out violently. Call out. With tracking, faster than arrows, the bullet of the soul entangled by the tyrant instantly defends the defense that explodes and parries. Emission, domineering, plus the penetrating power of soul burning. Armor color is destroyed by this blow along with its black armor. The bullet directly blasted into Jhin's body, but the blood spray after being attacked did not appear. What is even more creepy is that a large number of white souls like thick smoke directly emerge from Jhin's huge body. The soul was completely ignited, and the natural flame of the Lunaria clan seemed to act on its soul. Immediately afterwards, it formed a Prometheus-like skyfire shape, and Hancock suddenly controlled it to fall. Boom. Under the deafening blasting sound, Endless suddenly erupted, and a suffocating scorching heat rushed directly downward. Most directly, Jhin, who has lost his soul and looks like a walking corpse, is directly bombarded by the flames ignited by his own soul, and instantly turns into a gray and black wave area as the name suggests. Dissipated with it, and the soul that formed the fire of heaven. Seeing this, the people around couldn't help swallowing, and looked at the lofty Hancock, as if they were meeting an empress. There are fears and fears, especially the opponent's terrifying strength, plus the ability to get Charlotte Linlin. Thinking like this, but seeing Hancock caressing his beautiful G hair, revealing a perfect face, under this attention, his thoughts changed somewhat. Hancock's stunning beauty is not just talking. Master Moda said that if the converts are not killed, who wants to end up like this group of guys? As if acknowledging the eyes of the audience at this time, Hancock said loudly. With enough pride. But it made people's hearts rise. Although she was very rude, she was really beautiful. The scene suddenly changed direction because of Hancock's special appearance. The eyes of many high-level cadres of the Beast's pirates and the All Nations army directly turned into hearts. So beautiful, it's unbearable, she is simply the most beautiful woman in the world. We admit defeat, we all listen to you, Lord Nundi. Katakuri looked at the group of people who were suddenly in heat, but his expression changed. He could predict something when he could still use Haki. That's different from the scene of life deprivation under the threat of Mother. In an instant, a powerful aura erupted from Hancock's body. Immediately under the impact of the invisible aura, those eyes were full of love, as if their hearts and souls were taken away by Hancock's beauty. The soul representing life on the body suddenly rose directly from the body and forcibly escaped. Countless people rolled their eyes because of this, and fell heavily to the ground. Is this the so-called scene where the soul is hooked away in the true sense? Seeing such a scene, Moda laughed in his heart. In fact, Hancock's use of the soul fruit is also in the development expected by Moda. That guy Charlotte Linlin used the famous Conqueror's deterrence to directly take away the soul and lifespan of the target who feared him. And Hancock, who also owns Conqueror's Haki, can naturally use Charlotte Linlin's method together. At the same time, for now, Hancock still has the biggest advantage of his own appearance, which can be used to play another routine. It's like combining this ability with the sweet fruit ability in her original book. From the target who will raise a peeping heart for his own beauty, directly force his soul away. In this regard, although it is not as convenient as Conqueror's, but with the outstanding user Hancock himself, the effects and aspects can have a wider direction. Harvesting a large wave of soul life energy directly, under the control of Hancock, it directly turned into an energy body like a blood dandelion, and flew to the side of Wanakuna's army. The repairing effect brought by the soul is not only to make the soldiers who already have fairy beans recover faster. Even those ships that were damaged due to the boarding battle also had the basis of life, and under Hancock's will, they slowly recovered. That is the broken deck, the damaged ship pillars, etc., all of which have been beyond the normal situation, slowly recovering like a new life. It is enough to see that the effective paramecia fruit is so domineering, and it is also the best embodiment that the advantages of the sea outweigh the disadvantages. Since the death of Jhin, who shouted for the unyielding soul, and seeing the result of it, except for the pirates who passed out after being deprived of their lifespan beyond the normal range, under the two major forces of nations and beasts, there has been no screaming situation. As a result, the war came to a complete end. The victorious side cheered and celebrated loudly, and even with the huge reserves of combat power, they will completely resist the crushing trend of the Double Emperor Alliance, and show the sea in a grand manner. Under the cheers, Moda defaulted to speak, and almost everyone gave up resistance and made a choice to survive. It's all over. As the eldest son of 10,000 kingdoms, Perispero knows better than anyone else that with the death of Big Mom, after his mother's soul ability is taken away by the opponent's trump card, it is not only the remnants of them on the battlefield, but also those who are thousands of kilometers away. The entire 10,000 kingdoms are already prisoners of the flying generals. Even if there is a chance to escape, in the brutally competitive new world, without the presence of 4 emperors-level combat power, it will be difficult to survive. Is it still over? Katakuri, who had been under the pressure of Gion before, gritted his teeth and made the last resistance, turned his head to look at the flying general in the distance, and his brother Perispero who looked lonely. With a brief gloomy expression, he closed his eyes wearily. Next moment, his body, which was almost covered with blood, like countless holes, fell backwards again, lying on the ground in a big character, and the trident earth dragon came out weakly, and rolled to the ground, a few meters away. Even if there was a secret alliance with Kaido, and they wanted to start a war, they didn't expect that after the war, the problem would be defeated. They all underestimated Moda's power too much. The world is still too huge, there really is such an existence. In a short period of time, he was able to become the Emperor of the Sea from an ordinary person on the sea, and the forces in charge reached the scale of this kind of war that crushed the forces of the Double Emperors in less than 10 years. The moment his back hit the ground, he no longer wanted to think about what he would face in the future, but instead felt a sense of relief welling up in his heart. At this moment, a light source full of energy fell on Kotaku Kanami. Just the moment it touches the skin, the energy instantly dissipates. The resulting effect was that Katakuri felt that his almost exhausted physical strength and painful wounds were undergoing rapid repair and recovery. This sudden change made Katakuri, who had accepted the result of the defeat and was lying on his back with his eyes closed, open his eyes in doubt, and looked at Gion in front of him. Don't be surprised, even if it's not Moda, as far as I am concerned, your value is still great, Gion said. Since you have made a choice, naturally capable people, even if they are currently prisoners, can get the treatment they deserve. Although it was crushing along the way, Gion also recognized the opponent's strength. Mastering the tyranny, predicting the future, and developing the fruit to awakening, if you don't get the speedy fruit, the situation is really hard to say. Without obtaining the desired ability, Gion's strength has reached the level of Admiral's alternate in the original book, and his strength can be said to be comparable to Admiral's. After having the speed ability, the most suitable ability, the effect is completely 1 + 1 is greater than 2. Even now the 3 marine monsters, Gion also has a probability jump from fighting 1 to winning. Actually, you should also be thankful. After the 10,000 Kingdoms territory was promoted to the territory of Wano Kuni, you have such a chance of being defeated and surviving. And after experiencing this battle yourself, you should be able to understand better. Everything under the leadership of that man is what a difference. Gion said, looking at Moda. Over the years, her personality, charm, intelligence and strategy, and other characteristics have somewhat made her gradually change into the shape of Moda. Katakuri lowered his eyes and remained silent, and only after a while did he say, "How will my family arrange it?" "Then it's up to you or the choices you can make. Since you are a talented person, I can tell you that in the arrangement of prisoners, there are also examiners." Hearing this, Katakuri didn't say anything more. Soon, after accepting the fact that he was defeated, he was bound by seastone chains like the rest of his family and was captured on Wanakuna's battleship. This new world battle involving the peak of the 3 emperors also came to an end when the entire 10,000 Kingdoms islands turned into a floating form and left the waters of Toto Land. Under the live broadcast of Morgans, the title of Air General has reached an unprecedented peak in the world. Sabaody Archipelago. The popularity of the live broadcast under the huge projection screen directly brought an extremely significant and terrifying post-war frenzy in this illegal area. Area 13. Inside Shaki's ripped-off bar. The long-lost place was overcrowded, and many pirates gathered in front of the bar, talking about the earthquake incident. Hey, have you all watched the war that happened in New World? Of course, almost all the people in Sabaody flocked to the world projection screen. Who wouldn't know? Hey, I really didn't expect that Big Mom, who has dominated the world for decades, would die in the hands of the Flying General. Hey, compared to this, what I can't figure out is that Kaido of the Beasts, together with Big Mom's Dark Alliance, failed to take down Wano Kuni. This country is really terrible. It's almost as good as Al-Buff, the #1 power. It has to be much stronger. That's right, and this war can actually end sooner. Doesn't that monster Moda also have the ability to destroy the world? If it comes directly to a few giant islands, the war should end in an instant, right? Gee ha ha ha. How can we viewers know the idea of the strongest monster in the new era? But since the other party can defeat Big Mom and Kaido of the Beasts, there should be no doubt that he can replace Whitebeard and become the world's most powerful monster. Be a strong man. Whitebeard isn't weak either, but who knows, the legends are kind of interesting. Most of the pirates are afraid that the world will not be chaotic. For a while, their eyebrows were beaming and their saliva was splashing, as if they were in the battle of the world not long ago. In the back room of the bar, the coders who had just returned from work gathered together quietly drinking wine, which seemed a little out of tune with the atmosphere in the bar. The discussion was really intense. The proprietress Shiki walked in and said to the silent Rayleigh, "You seem to be in a bad mood." "It's not bad, but it feels a bit unexpected," Rayleigh said with a sip of his drink. "Is the era about to usher in a frenzy of drastic changes?" Shiki took a sip of his dry cigarette and told his wife's thoughts. "Don't look at the fact that it is basically talking about Moda and his powers skyrocketing fame after being the victor. Everyone knows that the stable pattern of 4 emperors, which has been maintained for several years, is broken, and it will definitely usher in another era of huge frenzy. Maybe, rather than discussing these things, the ambitious guys may have already started staring at the legacy of the emperors, or the throne vacated by New World has become eyeing. Isn't that better? More people are willing to flood into New World. That's what Roger wants to see." Hearing this, Rayleigh nodded. "So I didn't say it's okay, but what I didn't expect was the strong rise of the Flying Admiral." "I also understood." Shiki was silent for a while, and then said, "Do you think he is the kind of person Roger said?" "Although I haven't seen it with my own eyes, my first impression of Moda is that he is more likely to be a character like Rox." Shaki's pupil shrank. Rox, but the absolute ruler of the sea in that era, and Shiki, who once sailed as the 9 Snake Pirates, even had contact with him. so it is deeply aware of the other party's terror. What Rayleigh said, combined with the current situation in New World, it really seems to be the case. The coalition forces of Linlin and Kaido were defeated forcefully, and the strength displayed by the subordinates is more or less a symbol of the real monsters in the New World. The weird atmosphere lasted for a while, and Rayleigh changed his expression again and said, "But it's just my personal intention, it's not certain. At least this situation will be a secret for Shanks to enter the New World." Rayleigh changed the subject, and Shiki naturally followed suit, and said with a smile, "His current strength can be regarded as a sea monster, but there is still a long way to go from that kind of monster." Haha, but that's it. The hardships of the road ahead can sharpen the growth of a man. Rayleigh said indifferently, and at the same time showed his expectation. The former child has grown up, and for the new world he bet on, I really want to see it, I just hope that time will come sooner. Because at that time, is it the closest to the agreed time? Shiki glanced at the other party. You will almost be an old man at that time, so while you can still move now, hurry up and help me at the front desk. I am specially talking to you, the business ahead is very busy. Rayleigh, who was still a little cheerful, was immediately sent to the front desk by Shiki as a coolie. The heated discussion in the Sabodi archipelago is consistent with the state of the world at the moment. This time, it is not only the strength of the Air General Moda, but also his power. He also directly became famous in the first battle and completely became popular in the world. Some people worry that there is such a terrifying overlord in New World, who seems to be stronger than Whitebeard. People can't help but worry that if a conflict arises, whether the Marine government can suppress the other party, especially the air generals, who are a bit too young. There are also people who are mad because of this, not only that the hopelessly stable pattern of New World has been broken, but everything seems to be a plan that can be exploited. There is also a party affiliated to Wano Kuni, and the champagne has already been opened under the cheers. Who can be so excited about this must be the Don Quixote family, who thinks they are completely on the Moda relationship. Before the war, the family members were all nervous about this. After all, if something happened to Wano Kuni, the deal they had worked so hard to earn might also be at risk of disappearing. But now, with thicker thighs, life will naturally be easier. It's a pity that Kaido also fell into it because of this, but this also gave Doflamingo a wrong example, although he did not have the background of the former. But after all, the main line is still Moda. Kaido is just a pity. Doflamingo can still make a decision easily. At this moment, at the family dining table, it seems that the tension of the previous half-day has been lost, and people are finally feasting. This kind of situation made the two sisters Monet and Granos, who were newly joined not long ago, have a deeper impression of Moda. Hey, Dover, you said that since Moda 1 in New World is vacant, can we use his reputation to grab a piece of territory in it? Toribol said that for participating in many fire festivals, he was very envious of a country with its own territory. Shishi, those sites are afraid of being taken by life, and they are useless. Doflamingo laughed. But don't worry, I already have a plan for our territory, and I also know some scandals in Marine this time, it won't be long. We can all be a royal family loved by all peoples. Now, let's take a good look at this once again turbulent era. It's boiling. I just don't know when the ever-exploding wave of the times will completely erupt from the accumulation and pull those guys down from the high place. After the night of the peak battle, after rest and adjustment, and with plenty of blood dandelions, the soldiers of Wano Kuni also swept away the exhaustion of the battle in 7s and 8s, and began to celebrate this great victory alive and kicking. The aces of the royal court fan also participated in it, especially Yamato, who was still smiling very happily in the active atmosphere group. It seems that the failure of her father Kaido did not have any impact on her own mentality. Different from the cheerful atmosphere, there are prisoners specially placed on special prison islands. The expression of the defeated party can be deduced from the faces of these people. It was a mixture of various negative emotions such as loneliness, confusion, worry, and panic. Although they saved their lives because they were forced to become prisoners, no one knew what the future would be waiting for them. Especially for the members of the Charlotte family, the huge gap from the original ministers to this level is somewhat unacceptable. At the same time, in terms of the family, they also suffered heavy losses, not only the leader's mother, but also the family members. Only 1/3 of the family members were lost in this battle. But the thought of wanting to avenge him was only thinking of the power of Air General Moda, and all he had was fear. Lose once, fear 10 years. and this battle directly defeated their remaining resistance and let them see what despair is. Zhang thinks so. On the surface, many people still look at her mother, who can be regarded as the only two core members of the Shaw family. Katakuri big brother, Paraspero big brother, are you alright? I'm so afraid of what's going to happen to us, Sister Smoothie. Paraspero stuck his tongue forward, but after recalling that he no longer had a lollipop in his hand and could no longer use his abilities, he looked lonely again, and then he looked aside from being brought here, the second brother who has never made a sound. Katakuri, do you have any way to extinguish it? In this era when the strong are respected, he, as the elder brother of everyone, is the one who can finally lead the Charlotte family again, and is the strongest Katakuri among all the children. After being silent for a long time, Katakuri opened his eyes, a strange light flashed across his pupils, and he said solemnly and firmly, even if we have the chance, we will not be able to sail on this sea. If you don't bear the name of Wano-kuni. Hearing Katakuri, the strongest member of the Charlotte family, say this, all the members of the family fell silent for a while. As the four emperors, the usual mother's tyranny does not only affect the nations. There are also many enemies at sea, but even though he had already surrendered in his heart, it was another matter to express it. In the final analysis, not all of them, like Katakuri, walked slowly during the period of fighting with their mothers, and more of them lived in a pampered and comfortable life during the period when the Big Mom pirates became famous and even built the world. They are all the noble Charlotte family who used to be the four emperors. The flying general, who has already taken Wan Guo away, is likely to place him outside the Wano-kuni Sea area as a new line of defense, so he will imprison us as prisoners instead of directly eradicating them all. Now that the topic was started, Katakuri already had a decision in his heart, and continued to say, the territory of the 10,000 kingdoms is huge, but there is also a shortage of personnel now. If we surrender to the air general earlier, maybe we can also be better. In the early sense, returning home, and inheriting and protecting the legacy of a good mother. With this kind of righteousness in mind, many of Charlotte's children, who had already surrendered in their hearts, began to go along with their elder brother Katakuri's wish. In a certain sense, in terms of blood relationship and family composition, members of the Charlotte family are even more willing to favor and trust Katakuri than the mother of the original ruler of all nations. Even if the calm and perfect image that has been maintained for a long time under the scarf is revealed, it is still the same. Then, we would love to join. With both hands locked in seastone handcuffs, facing Moda's arrival, Katakuri resolutely, as the leader of the family, knelt down on one knee towards Moda, with a ritual gesture of offering loyalty. As long as I can protect my younger brothers and sisters, I can devote my life to Wano-kuni as much as I can. Seeing this, the children of the family behind him, especially Paraspero and Smoothie among the outstanding ones, also followed Katakuri's movements and knelt down to show their submission. On the way back to Wano-kuni from the plundered 10,000 isles. It's just the next day, not only many cadres of the Beast's pirates Shinta, but also the biological children of Big Mom, more than 90% of the personnel all chose to surrender. The latter has Katakuri's operations, and there are also people who, like the former, are more or less based on judgments of the situation. Of course, under Moda's perception, whether these people are true or not, they can be seen at a glance, and there is nothing to hide. Unwillingness is a little bit, and fear occupies most of it. But after all, they are not people who have entered their main core area, not to mention that these are basically pirates who eat hard but not soft. Using fear to restrain them may be more useful than the direct loyalty. Prisoners are not qualified to talk about conditions, but since it is Katakuri, Moda can give a clear statement. Moda faced these prisoners and looked at Katakuri, who was at the forefront of the Charlotte family team. Wan Guo will be a new area outside the Wano-kuni Sea area, which is equivalent to a newly incorporated force of Wano-kuni. You can stay in 10,000 kingdoms again, and be responsible for the security and management. Moda swept to everyone, not only the 10,000 nations army, but also the staff of the 100 Beasts Corps. How well you want to live in the future depends on you. How much value can it bring me? After Moda finished speaking, he used the ability to lock the target, and immediately two girls were pulled out by Piao Piao's ability. Pudding, elder sister. After the two were brought out, someone called out nervously. Looking at the two people who are also trembling with fear, one is Pudding, who has the ability of memory fruit, and the other is the most brilliant ulti in the original book. However, The difference between the latter and the original work is that the fruit of the Pachycephalosaurus is now actually the fruit of Yamato's phantom beast species, the Oguchi true god, in the original work. Perhaps it was still in order to survive in a place like the 100 Beasts, stealing the fruit from Kaido, but the fruit has indeed changed. This is just Moda's conjecture, but no matter what it is, Ulti, who has the ability of phantom beasts, does have the value to be cultivated into an elite. Don't be nervous, I've taken a fancy to your outstanding abilities, and you can stay with me in Wano-kuni first instead of prisoners. Of course, if you are disobedient, you should know that fruit abilities can also be transferred. Holy Land, Marie Joys. In the top floor office of world government, the light is bright, but the atmosphere among the 5 elders is unprecedentedly oppressive. What caused this situation is undoubtedly the direct phone bug with the appearance of Moda in front of him. I said, this is a game that must be won in the first place, and I only came to you to minimize my losses. If it weren't for the late arrival of the beasts, my army might have to stumble again. Even under the battlefield that beasts joined halfway, I haven't seen any coalition forces you mentioned. Now that things are going on, you still have the nerve to come to me to fulfill your promise? The phone bug imitated Moda's unceremonious sneer expression at the moment. Are you taking me as a philanthropist or a fool? Between the powers, there was silence immediately. This is the real harm of words. After a while, 5 elders, who was wearing a kimono and holding Onitoru, said in a deep voice, breaking the silence, you took away the entire 10,000 Kingdoms islands in the Toto Land Sea area, and there are definitely many people who are envious of you, even if you are at Sea Emperor, but there are always many pirates who are not afraid of death, let alone Whitebeard in New World. Another 5 elders went on to say, the last time was Marine's mistake, this time it will definitely not. We will let CPO assist. 5 elders, who was in charge of diplomacy, thought of something, and suddenly said, of course, there is another option. Now the scope of Wano-kuni you control is already large enough in the world, and we can sincerely invite you to become a special member of the franchise country, and do not have to pay the sky gold. As soon as these words came out, the other 4 immediately showed surprise. Not to mention that there will be no newcomers, that it is definitely unprecedented. As far as the world government is established until now, there is no country that does not need to pay the sky money to become a member country, and it is an illegal country that has been at sea for a long time. The phone bug also widened his eyes in surprise, followed by a burst of laughter. If you were trying to make me laugh, then congratulations, you made it. 5 elders, who made the suggestion, couldn't help but turn black, and then explained, the franchised countries can be protected by the marine government, and they can connect with the whole world, which is enough to make your Wano-kuni develop faster and farther, and we will ensure that the fairness of the member countries all over the world, and the World Conference can meet the certain requirements of all parties. Fair. Do you think that I will believe what I say to children when I have achieved what I am now? Moda smiled disdainfully, not to mention that he also knows that in the so-called empty throne, there is a man named I am the absolute ruler sits in it. There is no unique king in this world. This sentence was a joke from beginning to end. Asshole franchise country. I don't have any idea, besides, have you misunderstood your status? It's not my choice now, but your request. Moda didn't have any politeness in his words, and continued. I won the war alone. Anyone who is eager for those spoils of war, just come, whether it is Whitebeard or your world government. Click. The phone bug hung up immediately. Whether it is words or actions, how many people feel angry? It's just that none of them appeared out of breath, but generally frowned. It seems that completely defeating Big Mom and Kaido has boosted his confidence a lot. He also has the power of beasts and nations in his pocket. Even after going through war, it is definitely a huge number, and the powerful power displayed by Wano-kuni itself, combined with it, the opponent is now the only one in New World. Blonde 5 elders said, so, as this situation also in his consideration, taking the initiative to attack Wano-kuni, not only bringing the whole army back to Wano-kuni, but also bringing the Wanuo army into his pocket, it is also the terrifying fruit of Big Mom, also by the new king of the Amazon Lily. He is strengthening and enriching his background step by step, and he is already too greedy to satisfy the new world structure of 4 emperors. This is a beast that is constantly growing itself. When he develops, it is difficult to guarantee that he will not have a peep at the world government. Heart. 5 elders, who was previously in charge of foreign affairs, said that allowing Wano-kuni to join the alliance is not only a way to weigh the huge benefits, but also to test the idea of Moda. Some 5 elders suggested, This kind of situation can be reported to that adult, maybe he will be the next Rocks. Immediately, another 5 elders shook his head. But during the Rocks period, didn't we also inform the Lord? But the Lord didn't seem to care, and didn't give any instructions. The current Moda is not as good as the terrifying Sea Overlord at that time. At that time, the other party mainly attacked the Valley of Gods, and the adult did not make any sound. Obviously, this situation is even more impossible. It's tricky. The blonde 5 elders said in a low voice, if this is the case, it can only be decided by us. Even if it can't be solved, at least during the cleaning period that the adults said, let's try to restrict the Wano-kuni forces as much as possible. It is said to be a constraint, but in fact we have discussed this many times, but it has never been successful. 5 elders with a birthmark on his head said with blood, and, on the contrary, the new things revealed by the other party are what we want to incorporate, man-made devil fruit, or to shine in this war energy weapons in those combat suits. The rest of the people looked at each other in blank dismay. It was indeed such a reason. And in fact, Moda dared to yell at them like this because of these items, and it is also very difficult for Marine to have a chance to hit Wano-kuni hard in New World. Not to mention before, now that the 10,000 Kingdoms Islands have been taken away, the difficulty has increased several times. To some extent, the background of Marine equipment is still a bit weak, especially since Wano-kuni is located in the New World and is constantly acquiring more excellent power reserves. 5 elders, who was holding Ghost, looked at everyone. Whether it's just in case, or for future development, I think we can expand Marine's position and adopt the plan of the world's big conscription. Just when the world government decided to expand the size of Marine in the form of conscription. After several days of fermentation, it broke out in the aftermath of the New World Summit battle, and spread across the entire world in an instant at an extremely crazy and terrifying speed. It can be said that the last few days are the aftermath of major events, which are constantly spreading and radiating to the whole world. Countless newspaper offices are rushing to work overtime and desperately trying to increase their publications and printing, but even so, newspapers all over the world are out of stock as soon as they come out. The 4 emperors lost and Moda claimed the winner. The pattern of 4 emperors was completely broken, and before the vacated throne could usher in a newcomer, the entire New World Sea area had become a situation where 2 emperors respected each other. The 10,000 islands in the sea area of Toto land was even taken away by the flying general. Wano-kuni's background in all aspects will once again be promoted by leaps and bounds. Even, it has already surpassed the strongest Whitebeard pirate group in New World. The flying general himself showed his dazzling record in the Battle of the Apex, and he began to show the limelight of the first person in New World. Followed by, Naval Headquarters also issued a brand new arrest warrant after the negotiation was finalized. Even in the region that used to be the New World 4 emperors, except for the display of powerful fruit abilities and the exposure of the Flame Festival, there is no record of high rewards for combat forces such as the Imperial Court. And this battle is to make everyone look away, completely suppressing the long-established top cadres of both sides. Therefore, when the bounty was announced this time, it formed a huge gap like a chasm between the previous bounties, and everyone who saw the bounty couldn't help but lose their voices in shock. Air General Moda, one of the twin emperors, the Wano-kuni monarch, is undoubtedly the apex of New World history. The world's #1 man, the world's #1 swordsman. A bounty of 4.851 billion Baileys is offered, regardless of life or death. Reki Yamato Royal Court Fan Trump Card. A bounty of 1.7 billion Baileys is offered, regardless of life or death. Momoshagi Gion, one of the 3 great swordsmen under the general's command, and one of the top 10 royal court aces. A bounty of 1.895 billion Bailey is offered regardless of life or death. Empress of Seoul Boa Hancock Royal Garden Ace. A bounty of 1.7 billion Baileys is offered, regardless of life or death. Lafitte Royal Garden Ace. The fruit is unknown, it is suspected to be a phantom beast, and the bounty is 1,021 million Baileys, regardless of life or death. Spider Prostitute Black Maria Royal Garden Ace. A bounty of 800 million Baileys is offered, regardless of life or death. Hakai Mihawk, the 3 major swordsmen under the Ace General of Utingfan. A bounty of 1.6 billion Baileys is offered, regardless of life or death. 4.851 billion Baileys. This is the bounty that Naval Headquarters has reenacted for Moda after less than a year. This amount, even going back and looking through the entire magnificent Sea Circle calendar, can't find a few bounties higher than Moda. As a war crushed by Big Mom and Kaido of the Beasts, the bounty has even reached hundreds of millions, which shows Marine's attitude towards it. It is in line with the reward list in the first-person statement that the world has recently preached. Coincidentally, the amount of this reward list is exactly 1 million Baileys higher than Whitebeard Edward Newgate, the strongest man in the world today. This is very intriguing. In addition to being Moda, as a member of the Imperial Group, the value of the cadres under his command has naturally increased. It can be said that the few people who are ranked in the Imperial Court are all about 1 billion or more. If any one of them is pulled out, it will be the ranks of the first class of big pirates and even monsters in New World. It is the alternate combat strength, such as the dazzling Snow Warrior, Hancock's 2 Imperial sisters, and those who shine in the war, all of which have a minimum reward of over 100 million. There is also a large group of combat power, because the number is too large, and it is impossible for Marines to choose one by one, so they have not yet been evaluated by the reward list. At the same time, these did not include those pirates from the 10,000 Kingdoms Army and the 100 Beasts Corps who became prisoners. Therefore, as long as the concept can be imagined, one can understand the horror of the current Wano Kuni forces, and it has even been recognized as the most terrifying existence on this sea. Let the incident continue to simmer. Moda took the spoils he got, and enjoyed the loud cheers of Shin-sus millions of people, and returned to his base camp. The 10,000 Kingdoms Islands are temporarily placed in the form of flying sky islands on the same level as the Wano Kuni Sea area. Sitting on 34 islands, Moda also began to think about the idea of becoming a great country. The original Wano Kuni, with the expansion of his facilities over the years, was only a large island at best, but now the archipelago in the Todo landwaters has ushered in. With a certain amount of capital, we can start to improve the quality the change. After all, the inland sea area is piled up by 2 mountain ranges. With the continuous expansion of the inner area, it will become more or less slowly crowded. And now it is not planned to expose the power of Wano Kuni after the founding of the country. Moda began to have the idea of sky islands, especially under the blessing of flying yachts and energy power. Facing the troubles of traveling to and from Sky Island, you can completely solve the problems. Of course, there are 2 other reasons. With the support of Piao Piao and Momo, flying Sky Islands can avoid the island-destroying abilities shown by IM in the original book to a certain extent. At the same time, whether it is defensive engineering or characteristic construction, it can be realized according to Moda's own ideas. Of course, before that, Moda just arranged his ideas. Although the Battle of the Apex is over, before that, Moda has not forgotten that there is also a Whitebeard regiment that is also under consideration. For the Whitebeard regiment at this moment, naturally, because of the process, result in rewards of the war, the captains fell silent on the Moby Dick. New World, near the waters of the Sphinx Islands. Several huge pirate ships are moored on the sea, with white whale-shaped bows. A black skull flag hangs on the top of the pole, representing the upturned crescent-shaped beard. It is the main ship of the famous Whitebeard pirates in New World, the Moby Jing and other ships. In the past, it was a lively and peaceful scene, but now with the newspapers dropped by several newsbirds, there is a soundless silence. Edward Newgate was sitting on a throne placed on the deck, but he didn't ask his sons to tell him the contents of the newspaper. After probably hearing that Charlotte Linlin had confirmed her death and that Kaido had lost, Whitebeard turned to the newspaper and started reading by himself. The content was no different from what his sons had discussed, but seeing it with his own eyes, Whitebeard was still a little shocked in his heart, and at the same time, because of the death of another former shipmate, he felt a little nostalgic for the past time. While most courted themselves and were rejected, all were once comrades in arms on a ship. Unexpectedly, now, the people of that era are left alone in this sea. Reminiscing about the past for a while, when Whitebeard came back to his senses, he could more or less feel the unattractive expressions on the faces of his sons at this moment. Since he had already regarded the other party as an enemy before, he naturally didn't want to make the other party feel better. But the problem is that the strength shown by Wano Kuni is not only to the extent that they are afraid of it. At least, in the face of Kaido and Big Mom's coalition forces, even if their Whitebeards dispatch the whole nest, it is impossible to crush and win like Wano Kuni. How ambitious and bold before the war, how taciturn after the war. Whitebeard glanced around and said, "That brat Moda just won a sweaty victory, and you are convinced by it? What? Is it because I, as your father, feel unconfident in my ability to deal with Swand? Whitebeard's question immediately caused the silent crowd to collectively deny it. Of course it's impossible. Father, you are the strongest man in the world, there is no doubt about it. Although the loyalty of the Whitebeard pirates begins with the family-like atmosphere on board. But before being loyal, most people joined the Whitebeard pirates for the title of the strongest man. As far as Whitebeard's strength is concerned, everyone absolutely recognizes it, but the root of the silence comes from themselves. Although they have Daddy's protection, they can sail wantonly on this most famous sea. But this battle, to some extent, exposed their sense of recklessness under the shelter of the flag. Whitebeard against the flying generals, of course they thought it would be Daddy who would win, but if the Whitebeard team faced Wano-kuni, the outcome would be hard to say. Gu la la la, such words are enough. Whitebeard did not allow others to say anything, directly interrupted what the group of sons might say in the future, looked at the captains and began to order. Marco, send someone to prepare and separate the team. Since Kaido is also participating in the battle, then we will take over their inheritance after their defeat. As for Linlin's Wangguo, since he was brought back to Wano-kuni by the other party, let's make a special trip to Wano-kuni. Let Laozi see if that kid Moda is qualified to cross over to me. The sons looked at each other in blank dismay, but since it was the father, it was naturally impossible to have any objections, so they immediately took advantage of the trend and started clamoring again. Of course Dad is the real strongest man in the world. I've wanted to say it a long time ago. Marine's way of offering rewards is intentionally disgusting. Otherwise, let's go and report some trouble to their New World G branch. Under the voice, only Teach was a bit out of place. He carefully stared at Hancock's reward order, although the exquisite appearance really suits his appetite, but what he pays attention to is the information about the ability to seize the soul fruit. Before, he still counted on his father to kill such an enemy for his future, because he also believed in Whitebeard's strength. But now, he looked at his father, who was beginning to suffer from hidden dangers, and began to worry. If Whitebeard also died at the hands of Moda, wouldn't his last long-cherished wish be in vain? But probably not. Teach still gritted his teeth uncertainly. The 10,000 islands in the Wano-kuni region. After being integrated by Wano-kuni, Wano-kuna's army began to be stationed in it one after another, and the thought of being ruled by Charlotte Linlin was changed to the preaching of loyalty to Moda. The content is also very simple, mainly to appease the hearts of the people, to show that they will not attack ordinary people on the island who are captured by the victorious side. On the other hand, it is announced that Wano-kuni will become the archipelago of Wano-kuni in the future, and the absolute ruler will also have Charlotte Linlin converted to Moda. The tax collected in it can even be half of the previous period of the kingdoms, but the people also need to deliver the soul as before in exchange for the right to live on the island. As soon as this announcement came out, the mood of the people who were a little anxious because of the relocation of the area and the change of the more terrifying ruler suddenly calmed down a lot. Some people are still looking forward to it. Compared with Wano-kuni, which is a famous and prosperous country in the New World, the condition of the final harvest is the biggest subsidy for their ordinary life. What's more, the flying General Moda, although his strength is terrifying, but as a ruler, he will not be as dreadfully unstable as Big Mom. For this, they just still paid their souls, which is even the usual price for the people in the archipelago who have accepted the rule for decades. The situation on Wano-kuni Island has also been gradually accepted. I believe that it will not take long before I can start to slowly integrate into Wano-kuni. Located in General Castle, Kozuki was reporting to Moda. After changing to a new environment, people need a process of adapting to the office. Moda was lying on the sofa with his head resting on a pair of white legs, looking at Kozuki who was bowing his head on the stage and said, "Before this, these tasks will be hard for you, of course, when you are resting, I will reward you well." Since the method of merging the 10,000 Kingdoms islands has been adopted, Kozuki has an advantage over Luo Shi in front of this state affairs. When Kozuki heard this, he raised his head and gave Moda a coquettish look, but said, "With your way of queuing people, I don't even know what time it is." It is extremely rare for the relatively reserved Kozuki to say such words. Hearing that, Moda laughed loudly. "Don't worry, you have contributed the most in the recent period, and the City of the Sky afterwards will cost you more. I have some thoughts, so of course I have to make you satisfied." Kozuki blushed, but didn't say much. Instead he changed the subject and said, "Before that, don't you still have to focus on Whitebeard?" Whitebeard. Maybe, but after the episode of Kaido, the opponent will change their strategy to some extent. It depends on what the shadow guards say. Mentioning this, Moda immediately looked at Robin in front of him. Speaking of which, there is some new news from the world government. With his jade legs and maintaining Moda's head massage technique, Robin Kaido. Well, from Katrine's side, the world government has prepared to issue conscription actions all over the world, and marine generals have begun to expand their recruitment, and even recruited breaking the tradition of the 3 admirals. Those who are capable can even be directly promoted to the new admiral. New admiral. Listening to Robin's report, Moda's mind quickly emerged in the original book, through the strength of the world's conscription, to replace the 2 vacant positions of Akainu and Aokiji. Fujitora has an extremely strong sense of justice and takes the safety of the people seriously. Admiral Akainu, pursuing absolute justice, and ridiculed as the shame of Admiral, the Green Bull Orama. The former is Paramecia heavy fruit ability user, and the latter is Logia sense fruit ability user. There are still 11 years before the riot era, and Moda doesn't know the scope of the conscription, whether the 2 will still follow the original letter and open the marine camp. The latter Moda cannot care about it, but Fujitora, who has another top-level rule-based ability, Moda has to care about it. If it wasn't for the urgent battle, then after finding the pure gold, Moda might use his lucky girl to find such a hidden strong man. But now that the world government has begun to plan a universal conscription scale, it happens that Katrine's current energy can be directly used, which is convenient for him to act. After reading this, he ordered again, notify Katrine of this world conscription record, let her collect information, and at the same time let the Shadow Guard CP under her support intervene, and give priority to finding a man named Lifetime. Learn. Robin nodded, keeping this matter in mind, and only waited for the follow-up to explain the task. At this moment, he is still doing a good job of massaging Moda seriously. Feeling the comfort brought by the technique, Moda closed his eyes and enjoyed while continuing to say, speaking of which, what is the situation of Big Mom's treasure house? After re-importing the prisoners who won the war as a source of combat power back to the 10,000 Kingdoms Islands, the Charlotte family naturally took the initiative to inform Moda of Big Mom's decades-old treasure house without any orders. It's just that he is familiar with Big Mom's mind, and Moda is not very interested in its so-called treasure house, and it is not even as good as Pudding or Budding's fruit ability. He also directly asked Luo Chen to accept it. That place is still hidden very deep, and even the mirror fruit is needed as a way to get there. This was originally the report she needed to make this time, but before that, she was forced to start serving. Hearing this, Moda praised, mirror fruit, it is indeed a powerful auxiliary ability if it is played well. That piece of mirror space, as long as it is a mirror that the capable person touches, can shuttle in a wide range. Whether it is used as a surprise army or a camp transfer, it is an excellent ability. So it was a breeze for Katrine to place the contacted mirror at Marie Joy's and raid the so-called Holy Land with the highest defense. But since you still need to use this ability to move, then the old woman should have a lot of oil and water hidden. Conservatively, it's worth at least 5 or 6 billion Baileys. As if thinking of something, Robin smiled slightly and said, Nami, who was arguing to go together at the time, completely turned into Bailey's eyes. 5 or 6 billion Baileys, put together, is definitely an impact from the perspective of a golden mountain in a silver mountain. Although it is not a huge number for today's Wano-kuni, this profit can still exert some profit value. Moda nodded, there is no interface, compared to money that is only digital, it is still a different kind of value. Then the old woman should also have a collection of devil fruit. There are a total of 5 devil fruits. According to the illustrated book, they are generally paramecia fruits. Robin recalled the information in his memory, and reported one by one. They are honey fruit, tableware fruit, disorderly fruit, bubble fruit, and jelly fruit. Kozuki, who was listening, said subconsciously, these fruits seem to be related to eating. Moda was also a little speechless. After all, Charlotte Linlin just likes all kinds of sweets. I didn't look at those grown-up children, but basically they all have this type of fruit ability. I thought that there would be such alternative and good paramecia abilities as mirror, book, and memory. Sure enough, I shouldn't have too many ideas about this kind. Although like Kaido, the Charlotte family generally has paramecia, but for the sake of greed, what Charlotte Linlin collects is mostly food. To be honest, it's not that they are more or less gifted development, and paramecia's magic, these abilities are more or less cumbersome negative effects. But not all fruits are harvests where the benefits outweigh the disadvantages. Except for devil fruit, the rest are all similar treasures, such as high-quality weapons, luxurious decorations, and rare special products in the world. Apart from the plunder of the Big Mom pirates themselves, the rest are obtained from the tea party just like the fire festival. This is the case with the high value attached to the treasure house. In addition to wealth, there are also the most important items for Robin in the Cake Island. That's the historical text collected by Charlotte Linlin, even the red signpost. For these, perhaps apart from the so-called Raftel and Uranus's information, Moda just let Robin pursue his knowledge longing. Counting it now, I have 2 signposts pointing to the final island Raftel in my hand. And the remaining 2, one is in Zou, under the protection and care of the Furfur tribe, and the other was originally on the Fishman Island, and now it may be on the Whitebeard side. Of course, even if it is not, with the role of the lucky girl, it is not impossible to reach these unknown areas. Perhaps, Moda can't help but imagine it maliciously. With luck, can he even go directly to Raftel without the answer that the road signs are connected into dots? After all, it is the case that the concept of luck has become ethereal. If it is really possible, I just don't know how much luck it takes to represent the value of the ultimate treasure in this world. Just then, the phone bug rang beside him. If it is notified to Robin, it will be considered as a notification to foreign shadow guards. Robin took it out of his arms and connected it directly. Immediately, a report sound came from it. Lord Robin, Kaido who was imprisoned has woken up. Wano-kuni Free Bowl. In the special prison grounds that Seastone Origin also built. Locked by the handcuffs and shackles made by Seastone, after waking up, Kaido just lay straight on the stool and chair. After a full few days, even if Zone's ability was restricted at this time, Kaido's injuries have already recovered half of his injuries without the damage of the remaining momentum. But at this moment, he didn't have the self-consciousness of being a prisoner at all, and even just glanced at the special bandages on his body. Without changing his expression, he started to drink loudly, and asked someone to prepare good wine for him to enjoy. It looks as comfortable as it should be. The soldiers stationed around, or someone who has experienced the darkest period, looked at Kaido in the cell. Seeing that he was already so arrogant, his heart was full of anger, and even the hands holding the weapon couldn't bear it. Hold tight. However, after thinking about the order at hand, the anger turned into helplessness, and he could only say in retaliation, "Don't think about it, no one will give you drinks, you prisoner." Kaido glanced at the opponent. Even though his physical strength was completely restrained by Seastone, his imposing eyes made such a soldier take a few steps back involuntarily. Even if the claw teeth are pulled out, it does not mean that the tiger loses the strength to hunt. "You guys go down, Shaolao Pavilion, let me take a look." At this moment, a voice came from outside. Seeing that the man who came was the ace of the imperial court, the soldiers immediately saluted respectfully, but at the same time they showed a difficult expression and said, "Master Yamato, Master Robin specially told us to watch Kaido carefully." As the general in charge of handing over everything from the outside to the inside, in addition to the level of combat power, the power is somewhat higher than that of Utingfan Ace. "It's okay, someone here has already reported to Robin, and Moda will come over later." Hearing this, several soldiers looked at each other and retreated sensibly. If the general is coming, it is undoubtedly to convey the incident with Kaido. It is naturally best for soldiers like them not to get involved in this kind of information. Oh lol. After the soldiers left, laughter came from the dark cell. "You had a good time in Wano-kuni, no wonder you don't want to go back to Laozi." Yamato walked up to the prison cell, threw the wine jug behind him into the huge prison cell, and replied in an impolite tone, "Now that things are going on, are you still talking about these meaningless times? Come to your side, and become a defeated prisoner." Even being restrained by handcuffs, Kaido still caught the jug steadily, as if he couldn't wait to take a big gulp, and then looked at Yamato. His previously smiling face calmed down. It seems that there is something to say, and it seems that it is looking at something, all emotions and thoughts, but according to the current situation of oneself, it turns into another mouthful of relief. When you grow up, you can speak with your mouth. It's a fact, but I didn't expect that there would be such a situation when I saw you, a stinky old man. Yamato looked at Kaido in the prison, just like himself who was thrown into the dark room by Kaido to reflect when he wanted to go to sea a few years ago. Kaido didn't care about Yamato's inexplicable expression at the moment. This is the fate of the loser. The law of the jungle is the law of nature. Human beings, as animals, cannot avoid this law. I'm not here from the perspective of the loser and the winner. Yamato's voice became inexplicably louder. So why, you suddenly intervened in this war? Of course, it does not only mean this, but also torn up the agreement between Wano-kuni. Kaido agrees, but with a slightly annoyed look on his face. Your strength has grown a lot, don't you think your thoughts are still in childhood? This world is cruel. As long as the interests are huge enough, brothers and friends who are like brothers and sisters, and countries that have been favored by you, can abandon and betray you without hesitation. Stop making excuses. Then since Big Mom is defeated, it's not for some benefit that you don't run away. Yamato said Kaido loudly again. Is this the way you want to become Joey Boy? Kaido, who still wanted to say something, stopped talking immediately, and stared at Yamato closely. Facing Kaido, who is gradually coming under pressure, Yamato is not afraid, and looks back with a strong expression. So, where did you know Joey? Robin and Moda said that once. I also overheard the conversation between you and Uncle Jhin. Kaido recalled the name, and then said to himself, the son of Ohara who was taken away by Moda. Immediately afterwards, he looked at Yamato. Then do you know what Joey Boy represents? I don't know before, but now. Yamato said, Joey Boy is a great man in the past, but he can also be a person who is destined to change the world in the future. Oh lol lol. Kaido let out a hearty smile. Unfortunately, as the defeated party, I will no longer be Joey Boy, and as General Wano-kuni, Moda, will not be Qiwuhai either. Yamato frowned beautifully, and was about to ask why, but the breath of a figure came from behind him. Even without the sense of knowledge and knowledge under the blessing of thunder, Yamato knew who was coming. Seastone restricted the ability and weakened Haki, but couldn't completely prevent Haki from being used. Naturally, he also knew that Moda was coming, so he took his mind off Yamato, refilled the flagon, and stared straight ahead. As he sensed, the woman named Robin was beside him, the one who defeated him in Linlin. Moda walked over step by step. Kaido. You're not welcome. As if life and death are nothing, Kaido directly put the jug back on the ground, and shattered it even though it was weakened by the seastone. So, unlike Linlin, save Laozi's life, do you want to humiliate Laozi? It seems that the substantive conquerors rushed away, although it did not cause an offensive effect, it undoubtedly showed the attitude of a king in a prison. I don't have the idle idea of humiliating the king, Kaido. Moda stepped forward and looked at Kaido who was facing each other in front of the cell. It would be a pity that you died like this, don't you want to realize your thoughts and long-cherished wishes? Joey Boy's philosophy is still the One Piece treasure that Roger said. Joey Boy's idea of changing the world was learned from Jhin when he was arrested by Marine. Knowing that Joey Boy is the language of the person who changed the world, Kaido, who had no goals at the time, regarded himself as the future, Joey Boy, who would cause world revolution. As eager to change this boring and rotten world. From this point of view, Kaido is worth living more than Charlotte Linlin. What's more, Kaido's strength and talent are just killing the opponent to take away the ability and extract the blood of the opponent, but it is far from being able to compare with the effect brought by the power of a top 4 emperors. Even though Moda defeated Kaido easily, there was a lot of restraint in it. Later, he became the strongest creature that was invincible in one-on-one duels. For others, Kaido's strength is definitely at the top level of terror. Hearing Moda's words, Kaido also understood the other party's thoughts, and said with an angry face, are you trying to pull Laozi on board? Compared with asking, it is more a prestige questioning. Facing Hu Feng with an angry voice, Moda ignored it and continued. Before you achieved Beast's pirates, you were the same as other people's pirate ships, Rock's pirate. Kaido's expression changed, and he was a little surprised why the other party knew so much, but he felt relieved when he saw the far-reaching planning of the other party and the full preparation before the action. What? You want to be the next Rocks? A former captain, but as a past loser, Kaido doesn't show much respect. Why not overtake Rocks and finish his unfinished business? Do you want to be the king of the world too? The ultimate throne, don't you want to? Moda said vigorously. I never said that I am a pirate. Compared with the so-called One Piece, of course the king of the world is more meaningful, isn't it? This is the second time that Moda expresses his final philosophy to outsiders except Dorag. The world's highest power and position, since boarded the general of Wano-kuni, the pursuit and motivation driven by greed will never be limited to the new world. Moda also ignored the strange reaction in Kaido's heart at the moment, and continued. I heard the conversation between you and Yamato just now. You said that I will not be Joey Boy, so what is the situation? Yamato, who was beside Moda, also immediately turned a very concerned look, staring back at the old father in the cell. Originally, even if he was arrested and became a prisoner, Moda would not explain too much when he asked such a question, but under the previous concept of the king of the world, Kaido looked deeply at Moda, and then stretched out his hand. Bring the wine. Moda smiled, took the jug that Robin had already prepared in advance, and used his ability to steadily send it to Kaido. After Kaido took a sip, as if he had entered a state of drunkenness, he laughed again, and suddenly looked at Moda outside the cell. Do you believe in the so-called legends? Without waiting for Moda to reply, Kaido said self-consciously, when I was young, I was arrested by Marine and sent to Vegapunk's laboratory, where I met that guy Jhin and learned from him that the legends of their race have been recorded. More than 800 years ago, the world experienced a war of chaos. I don't know the specific cause and process of the war, who is righteous and who is evil. I don't know, and I don't care. But in the end, today's world government and that group of celestial dragons. At that time, the leader of the forces opposing the world government was a man named Joey Boye, who was also a man recorded in Raftel. After the defeat in that war, Joey Boye, who was executed, left a prophecy before his death. In the next 800 years, there will be a new Joey Boye, who can achieve his ideal of changing the world. As time goes by, Joey Boye's prophecy slowly takes shape, people who will change the world in the future. And the period of that prophecy is 800 years from now. After saying the legend, Kaido looked at Moda again with deep meaning. When I reached a cooperation with you at that time, when I went to kill Kozuki Oden, I got the exact information from him. Wano Kuni will be in 20 years later, to welcome Joey Boye, because of the prophecy of the founding of the country. Hearing this, Robin and Yamato next to each other couldn't help looking at the generals they believed in each other. As far as the founding of the country is concerned, it has already been done a few years after Moda took over Wano Kuni. Compared to the present, although this sentence is different from what that guy Oden said, but for the member of Roger who went to Raftel and learned the real secret of Joey Boy from there. Needless to say, in the next 11 years, it will be Joey Boy's time. And the Wano Kuni you occupy is just the place where Joey Boy must pass through in the prophecy, so Joey Boy will not be you, and I, the defeated party, will not be Joey Boy. Listening to Kaido's words, Moda didn't interrupt from beginning to end. So, is this the change in Kaido's discourse from, I will change the world, in the dialogue between Kaido and Jhin to, Joey Boy, the one who will defeat me in the future, after mastering Wano Kuni? At the same time, after Jhin turned to support Kaido, he thought that no one could defeat Kaido and said, Joey Boy should not appear again. It's like the curse of being a potential world changer who is forced to become the gatekeeper of an old age after learning from a prophecy that he doesn't fit. It also makes Kaido, who believes in the supremacy of strength, turn to the so-called prophesied fate in the original book as an exciting challenge, and then say that the person who can defeat him, liberate Wano Kuni, as Joey Boy. From Kaido's words, Moda couldn't help laughing when he got some memory information to clarify. Legends are still fate. This kind of conceptualized misty information is no different from believing in it or believing in it. And who stipulated that the person who can change the world must be the so-called Joey Boy? He is still a loser in the end. Moda sneered. It's not so much that I won't be Joey Boy, it's better to say that I'm destined not to be Joey Boy. His idea is the so-called freedom and equality. In this world, do you think real and permanent equality of power is possible? Don't make me laugh, so I don't want to be that kind of conceptual character. What's more, the person who changed the world may be Joey Boy. Don't you think it's ridiculous to agree with this so-called fatalism? The true pursuit of the king is to create his own legend, to write down the historical achievements that can be recorded in the annals of history, and to resound in the future, not the historical past that the world government can cover up over time, nor is it the idea of Joey Boy, fatalism. After listening to Moda's words, it was like the blood of the king, regenerating vitality into the blood of the whole body. Kaido's expression changed from slightly drunk to serious. Even without my intervention, you who still control Wano Kuni secretly, knowing this so-called prophecy, would you accept your fate calmly? No, right? Even without Kaido answering himself, Moda has already spoken the answer. As you expected, the ultimate goal of building a powerful animal army to manage the arms trade is not to create a dispute at sea. Since you also want to start a war, why don't you come with me to a war that is enough to bring down those who are born nobles and those in power who are addicted to happiness? Kaido showed a smile. You are right. To drag down those high-ranking nobles and those in power, only the force of war to determine the value is what this world should have. Of course Moda knew Kaido's inner thoughts, otherwise he wouldn't have said such a special thing, so he said very directly, then what are your thoughts? I am very interested in the war you mentioned, but Laozi has a different idea from yours. Kaido glanced at Moda. What Laozi wants to create is a world where there is no distinction between high and low, and only force determines value. And you should not be interested in these, just want to achieve yourself to become the supreme apex. Moda did not deny or agree. The ideas of those in power are just empty talk now, but at least, the forces under my management can easily crush you and Charlotte Linlin. What's more, the winner is the king, and the loser is the bandit. You think that force determines the value, so displaying the value of your life in war is the proper manifestation, isn't it? Kaido was silent for a while, and then spit out two clear words. Laozi will not be your free fighter, but if it is only a gorgeous enough war, Laozi doesn't want to join the fighter. Gorgeous enough beyond your imagination. As for the value, it depends on how you personally present it. Moda said, looking back at Robin at the same time, ordering the other party to release him from the prison. After breaking free from the weak restraint brought by the sea stone, Kaido turned his body around, and immediately heard the sound of bones that hadn't moved for a long time, just like a giant's body, walking out of the huge prison cell directly, bringing a full sense of oppression. Yamato immediately widened his eyes, put his hands on his hips, and there was a slight electric current running in the corners of his eyes, as if as long as Kaido made any wrong moves, she would mercilessly stop him. Don't worry, since your father has made a choice this time, he won't regret it, Moda said meaningfully. Kaido snorted unceremoniously. Before the war, how Laozi wants to act as Laozi's own business. Of course. Moda said nonchalantly, but before that, there is a place that I need you to visit. Wanakuna's scientific research base is located in the core area. At this time, it had been several days in a row, and several scientists directly under the army surrounded the huge instrument, constantly studying the various changes in the lineage of the factors. In the huge culture tank in front of the instrument, Charlotte Linlin's huge body was maintained in a state of suspended animation. The so-called suspended animation, of course, is not the kind of situation that will naturally restore the characteristics of life. After Charlotte Linlin's ability was stripped, she undoubtedly entered a state of death. The reason for the feigned death is that the gold liquid extracted from pure gold is used for soaking in the instrument. Its function is to slow down the information of Charlotte Linlin's death in the body system to an extent of tens of thousands of times, so as to maintain the activity of the blood factor in the body. That is to say, the life of his soul has dissipated, but the vitality in his body still maintains a certain state of life. This approach is to keep the bloodline factors from death as much as possible when extracting Charlotte Linlin's bloodline factors for research. And the approach is undoubtedly successful. On the extracted Charlotte Linlin lineage factor, its powerful recording information and encoding carrier undoubtedly made the scientists who came into contact with the new technology tree of the alloy praise again and again. The strength of this bloodline factor is simply beyond the limit of human beings, even much higher than the reserves of the giants. Guy Saw, who has also turned from large-scale weapons to in-depth research on bloodline factors, can't stop making emotional sounds under the comparison of instruments and microscopes. How can it be done? You have been researching for several days, Comps asked from the side. Hey, who do you think this genius is? Guy boasted. I have already set up the combination chain of bloodline factors. From the perspective of fit, it has reached a high level of 80%. There is no problem at all in creating Big Mom's natural destroyer and steel balloon. Comps nodded. Construct the combination chain of bloodline factors, and then apply it to the embryonic mechanical body. With the Four Emperors physical level terrorist war weapon, it can be used as one of the biggest killers of our Wano-kuni. Guy nodded, then remembered something, and quickly said, then, those first-generation war weapons may have begun to be used in war. He couldn't wait to use these mechanical legions with superpowers to the world, and then let the guy Vegapunk notice that his technology in this aspect completely surpassed the other parties. Didn't Master Moda say that after Whitebeard's action, it is very likely that he will use it? Even if the other party does not come, there is enough time for them to shine at the Flame Festival. Comp said that he is also one of the creators of the Mechanical Legion, and of course he will be honored for all the praises that bring voices. Right at this moment, the machines in the strictest area passed through numerous checks, and one party stepped in after opening the door. Guy looked back, his pupils popped out suddenly. Guy. Kaido. Don't be nervous, I just brought him to upgrade our alloy technology. Moda raised his hand and pressed it, signaling to the shocked crowd to stay calm. As for Kaido, after entering the door, his eyes were immediately attracted by Charlotte Linlin's huge figure. The soul fruit was taken away by that Hancock. Linlin in front of him must be dead, but now, what is he doing around the other party?